Chapter 243. This was also one of Yang Qindong's habits. Unless there was a major event, he would do his morning exercise as usual and eat with his brothers afterwards. This was an opportunity to improve everyone's relationship. How could he waste it? The dignified duke of the great Ming dynasty actually dined with his servants. How incredible was this in Junko's eyes? At least in her impression, when her father ate, except for major festivals, her mother would sometimes sit with him and accompany him. Generally he ate alone, which seemed to show his noble status. But when it came to Yang Qindong, everything seemed to have changed. But they seemed to be getting along so well. Could it be that her father's method was wrong? Or was this Yang Qindong originally a different kind of person? Unconsciously, Junko's heart was filled with more and more doubts, which also made her curious about the Yang village. Yang Qindong, who was eating, noticed the changes on Junko's face. Looking at her frowning, gently nodding and shaking her head, he felt that she was so cute. After a while, he stood up and took the initiative to come to Junko's side. "Miss Junko, I have allowed you to stay here for one night. Now it's already dawn, you should go and see your guards. If there is no problem, it's time for you to leave." "Oh, then I'll go and see little Lin Kuan." She didn't know why, but the closer she was to Yang Qindong, the faster her heart beat. She couldn't figure out the reason, so she turned around in a panic and went straight to the place where little Lin was resting. In little Lin's room, after eating a lot of delicious food, his body was gradually recovering. When he heard the door open and saw Junko appear, little Lin struggled to sit up from the bed. "Princess, you are too tired, don't get up, just lie down." Junko hurriedly came to the bed and sat down on the chair beside little Lin's bed. "Princess, I'm fine. It's just that I ran too fast, so I'm tired. I'll be fine after a rest. By the way, when are we leaving here?" Little Lin was afraid that the goddess would look down on him, so he tried to show off. Junko didn't answer little Lin's question but asked, "Little Lin Kuan, can you tell me your impression of the Yang village?" "Imprint?" Xiao Lin seemed to be seriously considering this question for the first time. He pondered for a moment before answering, "Princess, Yang village is very mysterious. The people here are also very strong. Their training methods are also very unique." "Very powerful?" Junko seemed to have caught the key point and asked, "How powerful? Compared to my imperial father's guards?" "This." Xiao Lin scratched his head. "I don't know since we haven't competed. But it seems that the people here are stronger." "What? Are they more powerful than father's guards?" Junko asked in shock. She had never practiced martial arts before, so she didn't know much about it. But since it was Xiao Lin who said it, it shouldn't be wrong. After all, taking the initiative to slap their own face was not something that a warrior was willing to do. However, he still admitted it. That could only mean one thing, and that was that the people from the Yang village were really strong. "How are they compared to Ashikaga Yoshimasa's guards?" Junko continued to ask. This was the main point she wanted to know. Compared to the general's guards? They must be stronger. Xiao Lin seriously thought for a moment and then gave a rough answer. As if to increase his persuasiveness, he added, "The people here use advanced firearms that can fire continuously. This is something that the general doesn't have. If they really fight, I'm afraid that he will suffer a great loss." "So powerful?" Junko exclaimed again. This time, there was a trace of joy on her face. If everything was as Xiao Lin said, then once she drew Yang Qindong to her side, it was equivalent to having the strength to deal with the general. In that case, her imperial father wouldn't be so threatened. At this moment, Junko made a decision in her heart. That was to subdue Yang Qindong and make him work for her. If this was the case, her trip to the great Ming dynasty would be worthwhile. "Xiao Lin Kuan, your body is still very weak. How about this, you stay here for 2 days. I will explain it to Dong Shuai." Since he wanted to stay, he needed a valid reason. Xiao Lin's physical condition was the best excuse he could come up with. "No. Princess, Xiao Lin can continue to walk without rest. I can also protect Princess's safety." Xiao Lin didn't understand these things. He just didn't want to admit defeat. "Enough." Junko suddenly stopped Xiao Lin. "I said that your body is weak and you need to rest. Are you going to disobey my order?" Xiao Lin was caught off guard by the sudden change in the princess, who had a gentle expression on her face just a moment ago. But the education he received since childhood made him instinctively agree. This lowly one doesn't dare to disobey princess's order. "Very good, since that's the case, do as I say." Seeing Xiao Lin yield, Junko's face reappeared with satisfaction. Then she walked out of the room and went out of the courtyard to look for Yang Qindong. At this time, Yang Qindong had already eaten breakfast and was in his study looking at the various materials sent by the Intelligence Bureau. Hu Yan and Xiaoyin were attending to him on his left and right. The three of them were chatting and laughing, and it was truly a scene full of spring. But in this kind of atmosphere, Tiger's Mane suddenly knocked on the door and said, "Young master, Miss Junko wants to see you." "She hasn't left yet? Well, let her come in." Yang Qindong was well aware of this, but his face showed a puzzled expression as if he was surprised by this result. On the other hand, Hu Yan and Xiaoyin couldn't help but look at him, but then they smiled like flowers. They didn't have the slightest intention to be angry. After Tiger's Mane got approval, he led Junko into the study. As she entered, the 6 eyes of the 3 women unconsciously collided with each other. This was the first time the 3 women met. Their eyes seemed ordinary, but in fact they were filled with jealousy. Speaking of which, the 3 women were extremely beautiful women. It could be said that each of them had their own merits. Hu Yan was beautiful, Xiaoyin was full of charm, and Junko was cute and moving. Any man who could have one of them was already a blessing that he had done countless good deeds in his previous life. But when the 3 women were together with the same man, it was really like the old saying, the most difficult thing to bear was the beauty's favor. After a short exchange of glances, the 3 women separated. Hu Yan was holding a teacup, while Xiaoyin was pouring tea to express their close relationship with Yang Qindong. Only Junko was left standing there alone, seemingly a little embarrassed. With Junko's identity and the treatment she had received before, she should turn around and leave at this moment. She was the dream lover of many men. Why would she need to fight with other women for a man? But when she thought of all the things she had seen in Yang Village, she finally gave in. She would never forget the words her father said to her when she left Japan, and the eager look in his eyes. How did he promise that he would help his father find a powerful ally? And now the ally was standing in front of her. If she gave up because of her personality, it would be too stupid. For the sake of her goal and to not disappoint her father, Junko suppressed some of her anger and said to Yang Qindong with a smile, "Dong Shuai, this little girl came to tell you that because the bodyguard's body is too weak, I want to stay for 2 more days. Please help me." On the way here, Junko was thinking about what kind of good words to say to make Yang Qindong let her stay. For this, she had indeed thought of some words to say. But the moment she saw Hu Yan and Xiaoyin, she rejected all of her ideas and took the most direct way. If Yang Qindong was willing to let her stay, it meant that she still had some place in his heart. What she wanted to do next was equivalent to seeing hope. On the other hand, there was no need to say anything. Even if she forced him to stay, it would be difficult to achieve her goal. Wasn't the directness of her words a test of Junko's? She wanted to see what Yang Qindong's true attitude towards her was. Junko's straightforwardness made Yang Qindong, who was sitting behind the desk, feel a little surprised. He had already guessed that since Junko appeared, she would not leave so easily. She would even find all kinds of excuses to stay and ask for help. But he did not expect her to be so direct. This was beyond his expectations. Fortunately, the other party's goal was still the same. They just wanted to stay. This was in line with some of his thoughts. Since she was so straightforward as a girl, there was no need for him to refuse. He immediately nodded and said, "Okay, if that's the case, you can stay for 2 more days." Yang Qindong agreed so readily. When Junko heard it, her face lit up. She did not say any more words of thanks after achieving her goal. She turned around and walked out of the study, leaving Hu Yan and Xiaoyin behind. They seemed a little unhappy. Yang Qindong naturally did not explain too much about why he let Junko stay, what kind of identity she had, and how she would help him in the future. There were many things that he would not say casually before doing it. Otherwise, if Hu Yan and Xiaoyin heard it, they would think that he had lost his mind. Hehe, it's going to be the new year soon. Come, let's discuss what we should prepare for the new year. Yang Qindong laughed and hugged Hu Yan and Xiaoyin, using practical actions to divert the 2 women's attention. This move was really good. Soon, the 2 women's attention was diverted from the matter of Junko staying. They began to talk about the new year. Chapter 244. It was 1450 AD. The spring festival bell rang and the new year arrived. The Yang family manor was more than twice as lively as last year. The 4 madams gathered around Yang Qindong and smiled happily. The servants, guards of the Yang family all received recognition from the 6th young master's performance, making them overjoyed. The servants of the manor, Immortal Abode, Heavens Beyond, Yang Bao, and the staff of the Yang family bank all received a big red packet, at least 5 taels of silver. There was no cap on the red packet, making everyone smile. There was a saying, if you have money you can celebrate the new year every day. Everyone received benefits. Naturally, everyone was amazed by the benefits of the 6th young master, and their hearts became firmer. The first day of the new year passed happily. On the second day of the new year, Yang Qindong sat in a luxurious carriage and began to visit the capital. For example, the brothers and sisters of the Yang family, the Hu family, and some ministers who were on good terms with Yang Qindong had to visit once. Although he was now the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, he was only 20 years old. During such a festive time like the New Year, of course he couldn't put on airs. As a junior, he visited people to build relationships and increase friendships. He was very busy. Because there were too many people who needed to maintain relationships with him, even the eunuchs like Jining in the palace also needed to send a congratulatory gift. This didn't mean that he was afraid of anyone. He just didn't want to give the other party an excuse to find trouble with him. And he was busy until the 7th day of the new year. This was also the day of the opening of the Yang Family Academy. Before the new year, He Wenyuan and the others who came to find trouble with him were so embarrassed that they couldn't show their faces. In particular, the poem, The History of Lion-Eating Shi, was even more amazing. What was worth mentioning was that Yang Qindong actually took the initiative to go to the He residence to find He Wenyuan during the New Year's visit. He gave He Wenyuan the draft of The History of Lion-Eating Shi that he wrote himself. That day he had said that if He Wenyuan did not lower his head and admit his mistake, the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi would not be published. But in reality Yang Qindong didn't do that. With the idea that it was better to squash enmity than keep it alive, he took the initiative to visit He Wenyuan, giving him enough face. This was what it meant to be a good person. Taking advantage of the New Year period, he abandoned his status as a duke and came as a junior. No matter what he did, no one would say anything. Yang Qindong's way of doing things naturally made He Wenyuan endlessly grateful. Now that there was a way out, how could he not take it? Not to mention, he had been troubled by this matter these days. Many great scholars who were interested in the history of lion-eating Shi had taken the initiative to find him, saying that they hoped that he could lower his head and get the manuscript. This was another characteristic of literati. Once they encountered a good article, they would definitely want to read it. Otherwise they would not be able to eat or sleep well. Among these great scholars, some of their identities were not ordinary. In terms of qualifications, they were comparable to He Wenyuan. This was really difficult for He Wenyuan, because he really couldn't lower his head and ask for advice from a young boy. When he was troubled, there was no lively event in the He residence this year during the New Year. At this moment, Yang Qindong came and took the initiative to give him a way out by giving him the manuscript of The History of Lion-Eating Shi. How could He Wenyuan give him any face? He personally went out of the door and welcomed Yang Qindong into the main hall with a hearty laugh. This was a handshake and peace. After settling He Wenyuan, the enrollment of the Yang Family Academy was not so stressful, and the preliminary enrollment was completed in just a few days. Not to mention Yang Qindong was really famous. Originally he only needed to recruit 50 people, but the number of people who signed up had reached 500. He had no choice but to get them into the academy first, and then select the suitable candidates after the assessment. On the 7th day of the new year, the entrance of the Yang Family Academy next to the Yang Family Manor could be said to be very lively. More than 500 young people stood in groups of 2s and 3s on the spacious square. Among them were young master nobles and young masters who wore silk and satin. There were also some poor people who wore cotton clothes and even had patches on their clothes. The snow began to fall on the 4th day of the new year, and it continued to fall sparsely until last night. 3 consecutive days of heavy snow turned the Yang Family Manor into a white ocean. The branches, roads and roofs were all covered with a thick layer of snow. Groups of people waiting outside the Yang Family Academy could not help but sigh at the omen of a bountiful year. They all said that today would be a good year with good weather and a good harvest. At 8 in the morning, when the number of people gathered outside the manor had exceeded 2,000, the Yang Family Manor's gate opened from the inside. A group of mercenaries in camouflage walked out. Behind them was Yang Qindong in a green robe. His steps were steady, and his face was filled with a very amiable smile. Under the protection of Tiger's Mane on the left, and Beta Persei on the right, he came forward. The appearance of Yang Qindong made the noisy crowd quickly quiet down. He had this kind of magic, no matter where he appeared, he would always quickly become the focus of attention. At this point, although the contact time was not long, Junko, who was behind Yang Qindong in the crowd, seemed to be used to it. In about half a cup of tea's time, Yang Qindong and his group arrived at the gate of the Yang Family Academy, which made the atmosphere even quieter. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Yang Qindong strode forward and arrived alone at the academy's closed door. Looking at the door with festive couplets pasted on it, Yang Qindong stood still and turned around abruptly, looking at the crowd of outsiders. Thank you for supporting me so much and thank you for coming to support me. Later, no matter who it is, whether or not you are selected as a student of the academy, there will be a small gift for you. Yes, young master. Tiger's mane, who was called, nodded in agreement, then turned back and raised his palms and clapped 3 times. After 3 claps, 4 strong men came out of the Yang family manners team. They put the boxes in their hands on the ground and opened them. Suddenly, a burst of silver light shone directly into everyone's eyes. 2 boxes, a total of 10,000 taels of silver. This was the small gift Yang Chendong talked about. There were about 2,000 people here, and if it was divided evenly, each person would get 5 taels of silver. For many poor people, this was definitely not a small amount of wealth. 10,000 taels of silver with a wave of his hand immediately caused a burst of astonishment to come out from the crowd. In this regard, Yang Chendong was not surprised at all. He laughed and said, "It's still after the new year, all of this is just a gift from me to everyone. Of course, you can choose not to accept it, but I will never take back what I have given out. If someone doesn't want it, then the others can just divide it." Duke is righteous. Someone in the crowd took the lead and shouted with a sharp voice. Suddenly, this voice attracted countless people to follow and flatter. Ah! With a forthright laugh, Yang Chendong waved his hand, and 10,000 taels of silver were poured out from the wooden box and poured on the ground, piling up a small silver mountain. Each silver was 5 taels of silver, and there were 2,000 taels of silver. It was quite a large scale. With such a gift in hand, the atmosphere at the scene immediately became much more lively. Even Junko, who was in the crowd, couldn't help but blink when she saw this scene. Obviously, her heart was throbbing at this moment. Since she was young, she had learned Han culture under the guidance of others, so she understood the great Ming dynasty better than the average person. Naturally, she knew that 5 taels of silver per person could help an ordinary person a lot and could buy a lot of good things. 10,000 taels of silver, there were not many people in the entire great Ming dynasty who could do this. For the officials, there were even fewer people who dared to take out such a thing in public. Yang Chendong was one of the exceptions, but anyone who knew him didn't know how much his ability to make money was, and this thing was just a drizzle. He Wenyuan and the others in the crowd were also shocked by the scene of Yang Chendong's attack. It was just that, after all, they were officials of the imperial court. As long as they wanted to use the power in their hands, they never lacked money, not to mention that he only had 5 taels of silver in his hands, so they wouldn't be moved by him. On the contrary, they were more interested in Yang Chendong's literary talent and knowledge. After being shocked by the history of lion-eating Shi, that day, they had been thinking about whether there was any good work that could be written by Yang Chendong, so that they could learn and experience it. With such a thought, He Wenyuan stepped out of the crowd, wearing a thick and warm cotton robe, slowly raised his hands, cupped his fist and said, "Duke Zhongdan, today is a festive day, I don't know if there is any good work for us to admire and learn from?" He Wenyuan asked for a poem. He didn't come to undermine him but to repay him. Yang Chendong took the initiative to come to give him a New Year's greeting and the manuscript of History of Lion-Eating Shi. So he finally had a way out and didn't have to be forced by other people. Because of this, it was necessary to come this time to support the opening of the academy, and asking for a poem was the most common way for scholars to communicate with each other. Just by using the words admire and learn, he had already raised Yang Chendong's position very high. I don't dare, I don't dare. Yang Chendong was gratified by He Wenyuan's reciprocation, but his mouth was very polite and his face was extremely humble. The so-called good poem needs the accumulation of inspiration and knowledge. How can I compare with Sir He in this aspect? I'm ashamed, I'm ashamed. Ah, Duke Zhongdan, why are you so polite? I know that with your talent, it is not a problem to write a poem. Besides, today is a good day for the opening of the Yang Academy. As the first teacher, writing a poem is something that should be done. He Wenyuan laughed, and his tone was full of relaxation. He was also telling Yang Chendong that on such a good day, how could there only be money and not good poems? Wasn't this a disrespect to scholars? Chapter 245. Of course, on the other hand, it could also be said that He Wenyuan was creating more opportunities for Yang Chendong to become famous. This time, in order to open the academy, Yang Chendong had spent a lot of money to invite some great scholars. Although they were rejected everywhere, there were still people who agreed to come to the Yang family's academy to be teachers for money and a better life. However, there would always be differences between teachers. For example, Yang Chendong himself considered himself to be the chief teacher. Even if he was the chief teacher, how could he not perform at all in such a situation? That's right, that's right. Many others chimed in at this moment. Some of them might be looking for a lively scene, while others wanted to see Yang Qindong make a fool of himself. Of course, there were also some who wanted to listen to a good article that could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries to comfort themselves. With so many people chiming in just a short while, the 2,000 people in the crowd spoke out in unison, all of them requesting Yang Qindong, the chief teacher cum dean, to come up with a new poem to boost their prestige. With so many people having such a request, Yang Qindong knew that he had to come up with something. In fact, he really wanted to show off his skills. Because he had refuted He Wenyuan and the others before, he had made a name that he was not to be trifled with. But in fact, among the scholars there were still many who looked down on him. They always thought that a young boy would not have much real talent and strength. The so-called academy was just a way to gain fame. In response to these discussions, the Security Bureau reported many people, but Yang Qindong did not intend to make a fuss about it. This was not because he was broad-minded, but because he knew that the most difficult thing for a person to change was their attitude and perception. Even if he took action to deal with one or two people, it would not have any effect on the overall situation. Since that was the case, it was better to just let it be and let time and facts make the final decision. However, in the process, Yang Qindong would continue to work hard to change the mentality of the people of the great Ming dynasty, the way they looked at things and the way they did things. The premise to accomplish all this was to ensure that he himself was the strongest. Good poetry was also a kind of weapon. It was a sharp weapon that was specifically targeted at scholars. It made them feel ashamed of their inferiority and slowly gained their recognition. Now that the Yang Qindong Academy was about to open for business, He Wenyuan and the others had the same idea. Yang Qindong decided to satisfy them. In his mind, he began to flip through the famous poems that he had read in his previous life. When he saw the pure white snow around him, he nodded lightly and had a thought. Speaking of the grandeur of a poem that was about snow, it had to be the great man's Spring in Qin Garden, Snow. Yang Qindong's heart was filled with gratitude for the legacy left to him by the great man of his generation. He gently lifted his green robe, looked up at the sky, and concentrated his qi in his dantian. He then said with a powerful voice, "Yang family village, Snow." The scenery of the northern kingdom was magnificent. Thousands of miles were covered in ice, and tens of thousands of miles of snow fluttered about. Looking inside and outside the Great Wall, there was only the boundless expanse of the great river. The mountain dances like a silver snake, the plains like a wax elephant, wanting to compete with the Heaven Duke. Su Qing was dressed in red and white, looking exceptionally enchanting. There were so many beauties in the country, attracting countless heroes to bow down to them. Emperor Shiqin Han Wu was slightly inferior in literary talent. Tang sect Song Zhu was slightly inferior in style. Genghis Khan, the heavenly son of a generation, only knew how to shoot a big eagle with a bow. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the present. The clear voice was still resounding between heaven and earth, but at this moment, the noisy crowd had already become silent. Everyone was silent at this moment. Anyone who knew a little about poetry could feel the grandeur of the poem Yang Family Village, Snow, and the courage of the ambition. Even those who didn't know about poetry were shocked by the powerful momentum of Yang Qindong's recitation. They didn't dare to make a sound. Junko was also in the crowd. With her understanding of Chinese, she could naturally understand the poem Yang Family Village, Snow. Because she understood it, she was very surprised. She couldn't imagine that such a sentimental and majestic poem would come from the mouth of Yang Qindong, who was only 20 years old. In the front row of the crowd, He Wenyuan and other great scholars' representatives were trembling with excitement at this moment. They knew more about poetry than others. Because of this, they could understand the role and meaning of this poem in the first place. If the previous history of the lion eating the Shi family was a work of trickery and was created with enough understanding of Chinese characters, then Yang Family Village, Snow, showed a kind of broad feeling and a kind of lofty ambition. The past is the past. Counting the heroes, it depends on the three words, the past is the past in the present. The words were full of endless meaning, and it was a wonderful finishing touch. The history of the feudal society in China was briefly mentioned, and it turned to the present era of the poet, pointing out the theme of counting the heroes, it depends on the present era. The present era was a new era, and the new era needed new heroes to lead it. The heroes of the present era lived up to the mission of history and surpassed the heroes in history. They had more outstanding talents and would create unprecedented great achievements. This was the poet's firm self-confidence and great ambition. This conclusion, which shocked the ages, made a declaration that surpassed history and expressed the ambition to change the world. At that moment he thought for thousands of years. At that moment he saw the future. At that moment he was full of lofty sentiments. At that moment he looked down on the past and present. The entire poem reflected a kind of broad-mindedness and arrogance. Every sentence carried an extremely deep meaning. Once one carefully pondered over it, every word was like a jewel, and every sentence was full of fine sentences. At this moment He Wenyuan was completely convinced. The poem Yang Family Village Snow had completely conquered him. Convinced, he was the first to applaud. Good. Good poem, good mood, good mind. Loyal and courageous, your talent is admirable. He even said the word admirable. It could be seen that at this time, He Wenyuan was really impressed by Yang Qindong's talent. With him as an example, the other literati also nodded their heads and congratulated Yang Qindong with their fists clasped in front of him. With the literati taking the lead, the others naturally followed to congratulate. Yang Qindong smiled and cupped his fists to everyone. He knew that the 2 consecutive styles were very successful. Next, he would see the real academy. He turned around and suddenly stretched out his hands. His fists turned into palms and pushed the door of the Yang Family Academy behind him. With this sudden force, the originally heavy door opened from the outside. With a creaking sound, the 2 iron blocks on the left and right of the Yang Family Academy's door appeared in front of everyone. It was not correct to say that it was 2 iron blocks. Although it was iron, it had a round iron body and a long iron handle. It was like a machine in front of everyone. At this moment, behind Yang Qindong, He Wenyuan and the others also walked over. They also noticed the 2 big iron blocks with a cement base. Out of curiosity, everyone stopped and looked at the rare thing in front of them. They were speechless for a while. Yang Qindong had brought too many rare things to everyone. At this point, they were no longer as shocked as they were at the beginning. Therefore, at this moment, everyone's eyes fell on the Duke of Loyalty, wanting to see how he would explain this thing. Someone bring me the basin. Yang Qindong, who was chuckling, strode forward and came to the side of the iron block. He reached out and grabbed the iron handle. Then his arms slowly pressed down. Fall, rise, fall. The rhythm was even and slow. When Tiger's Mane took out a basin and placed it on one end of the iron block, clean water came out from it and fell into the basin like the Milky Way. Ah, it's working. The people closest to it saw it the most clearly. When they saw the water flowing out, they couldn't help but take a step back and then let out a scream. There was no need to shout. Everyone noticed that there was a lot of clear water flowing out. For a moment, everyone was surprised. They were obviously very curious about the iron thing that could work after a few moves. Some of the people in the crowd who had done farm work even widened their eyes. They suddenly thought that if they had this kind of thing in the land they planted, wouldn't they not be afraid of drought? Yes, this is a water pressure well, a tool to draw water from the ground. The water pressure well is a tool to draw underground water to the ground. It is made of cast iron and the bottom is a cement-like block. The head of the well is the water outlet. The back of the well is thick and thin. The tail is a pressure handle connected to the heart of the well. It is about 20 to 30 centimeters long. It is often used, making it brighter. The heart of the well is a water guide skin. It is the force of this water guide skin and the heart of the well that draws the underground water up. The principle is not complicated. It's just that because of the backwardness of science and technology, no one has studied physics. Everyone wants to learn from the sage and Confucius. Naturally, they have no time to care about other things. This is the water pressure well. It can draw underground water up to a few meters deep or even a dozen meters deep, to the ground through this method. With such a thing, people don't need to go to the river or the well to draw water in the future. They only need to install such a thing in the small courtyard to solve the problem of drinking water. When this thing is placed in the field, the problem of drought will be solved. Looking at the eyes focused on him, Yang Qindong's words were powerful and resonating, shaking the eardrums of everyone present. Ah, is it really so magical? Quick, who is going to try the other one and see if it can really draw water? He Wenyuan was also shocked by Yang Qindong's introduction. He remembered that there was a well in his courtyard. Usually water was taken from there. However, there would often be dirty things falling on it. For the sake of cleanliness, it naturally needed someone to take care of it. However, there was no guarantee that the water was clean. But now, there was such a thing that could make water appear on the spot. It was really convenient and much more hygienic. When He Wenyuan shouted, someone had already walked over. He reached out and pressed the iron handle of the water pressure well. After more than 10 times, water began to flow out of the iron mouth. Some people couldn't help but curiously go forward to have a taste. They immediately shouted excitedly, "So cool, so sweet." Chapter 246. Quick, let's go and have a taste. Hearing this, the crowd immediately became restless. Then one by one they crowded forward wanting to try this new thing. Even Yang Qindong was pushed to the side because there were too many people rushing up. The attraction of the two pressurized water wells was beyond Yang Qindong's expectations. After all, water was an indispensable part of the human body, so it was easier to arouse people's concern. After a full hour, the crowd's interest in the pressurized water wells was not as great. In the courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, 10 tables had already been set up. Because there were too many people, this was for the preliminary examination. The 500 people would be reduced to at least 4/5, which meant that only 100 people would be left. Even if it was 100 people, perhaps only half of them would be left. The 1-to-5 ratio in the preliminary examination made many people eager to try, thinking about how to enter the academy. One had to know that once one entered this place, not only would no one collect tuition fees, on the contrary, they would also take care of your 3 meals a day. For some poor people, they could learn knowledge without spending any money. It was a good thing that they could not ask for. The so-called preliminary examination was actually just filling in a form. For those who were illiterate, there would be someone who would explain it to them. In the end, they just had to act according to what they thought. The whole process of filling in the form was not complicated. In just 2 hours, the work of more than 500 people was completed. Next was the tour of the Yang Family Academy. The spacious and bright classroom, the new tables and chairs, as well as the erasable blackboard and chalk, once again became the focus of everyone's eyes. The tour lasted all the way until noon. Only then did people leave in 2s and 3s. Yang Qindong had already said that the results would be announced in 2 days. Who could enter the Yang Family Academy to study would be announced at that time. More than 2,000 people left with a satisfied expression. For many people, there was no need for this trip today. After hearing such a majestic poem and seeing many new things, it was enough for them to brag and show off to others. Yuan Yuan also left. Before he left, he even politely told Yang Qindong that if there was a shortage of teachers in the academy and he happened to be off duty, he would be willing to help for free. With regards to He Wenyuan's initiative to express goodwill, Yang Qindong naturally smiled and agreed. However, only he knew in his heart that what he was teaching was not the flashy 4 books and 5 classics. He was teaching the way of survival. This was also a preparation for accumulating talents in the future. After everyone left, the area outside the Yang Manor became quiet again. However, Yang Qindong had no intention of resting at all. In his hands, he was holding the information added by the applicants and was checking them one by one. The Security Bureau was already on standby and fully cooperating. Once there was a talent that the young master had his eyes on, they would investigate him as quickly as possible and then verify the authenticity of his identity. Although Yang Qindong, who had made a great contribution, had taken the initiative to leave the court, he knew that his contribution was too great, so great that even the emperor had to be wary of him. Now that he had made such a big move, it was impossible for the academy not to be on guard. In fact, the Security Bureau had already found 3 secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard from the applicants. Although they were good at forging identities in front of the extremely professional Security Bureau, they still revealed their foxtails. Not only were there secret agents of the embroidered uniform guard in the capital, but also spies sent by Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect, and there were as many as 8 of them. In addition, there were 2 spies sent by Walla Yeshen. Looking at the applicants screened by the Security Bureau, Yang Qindong shook his head and smiled. They really think highly of me. It seems that the young master can't keep a low profile even if he wants to. Of course, in addition to these spies, there were indeed people with good conditions among the applicants. For example, the 4 forms on the table. The first was Wang Si, the grandson of the Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji. He had previously been an editor of the Hanlin Academy and was a 7th-rank official. He was also one of Yang Qindong's friends from a long time ago. Later, when Zhu Qiyu had taken over, Jining had once sent people to blackmail Wang Ji. Because she had received very little, she was dissatisfied and removed Wang Si from his position. Although he was later reinstated, this young master no longer cared about official matters and became a frequent guest of the immortal abode. This person had also applied for the Yang Clan Academy. When he saw his name on the table, Yang Qindong pulled him out. After some deep thought, he decided to take him as a student. Yang Qindong had his own considerations for this. His attitude toward the great Ming dynasty was to boil the frog in warm water. In order to achieve this, the prerequisite was that there was enough warm water. He viewed Wang Si as a part of the warm water, and he would be able to influence the young master and young lords. It was even possible that Wang Ji's attitude toward the great Ming dynasty would change. Yang Qindong had been very close to Wang Xi for a period of time, so he had a certain understanding of this person. He was very smart and did not have the bad habits of a hedonistic young master. In addition, he was not very old. As long as he was willing to learn, he would be able to achieve great things. The second person he chose was called Feng Ku, a dispirited scholar. When he was young, because he was smart, he had become an elementary scholar early on, allowing him to see the hope of changing his family. He had immersed himself in books, unable to extricate himself. However, people like this often did not excel in anything other than studying. Feng Ku was an example of this. His learning speed was indeed very fast, but he was lacking in contact with others, so he did not have many connections with other scholars. When he was taking the high scholar examination, he was tricked by another elementary scholar. He had stuffed an unimportant note into the bottom of his shoe and brought it into the examination room. Originally, this was just a joke to tease him. However, he did not expect the result to be so dramatic. Feng Ku became an elementary scholar, but the elementary scholar who put the note failed. Out of revenge and jealousy, this person reported this matter to the imperial court. However, because things had changed, there was no way to investigate. However, because of this matter, Feng Ku was not given a position by the imperial court. He only received the status of a high scholar. In addition, his parents had passed away early and he was not good at business. In the end, the fields in his family were sold to buy books. Now even eating became a problem. This kind of bookworm, no matter where he went, he wouldn't be liked by anyone. However, Yang Qindong knew that this kind of person was more suitable for professional work. For example, the scientists in the future. It was because they had no desires and only had knowledge and science in their eyes that they were able to create many inventions. Accepting this person was to train Feng Ku as a seedling to be a scientist. The third person was called Chang Qianhao. He was from Jiangnan and was the son of the Chang family. Chang Qianhao's family background was very good, and his family background wasn't bad either. His appearance was distinguished and elegant, and the way he conducted himself was very smooth and sly. More importantly, this person had a good hand in calculating accounts, so much so that he was called the divine mathematician. He was chosen by Yang Qindong because he was good at arithmetic. As his business grew bigger, there was a lack of talents in this area. He was going to train this person as a future finance official. Although the Chang family was rich, Yang Qindong did not care about them. He believed that when he gave enough benefits, Chang Qianhao would know how to choose. Not to mention, he was confident that in the process of teaching him, he would completely convince this person. The last person's identity was a bit special. Not only was she a woman, she was also an armed escort. The profession of an armed escort was still very dangerous. After all, there were not so many cameras in ancient times. It was not like where the money trucks were attacked. Usually, there would be a lot of clues. It was because of the lack of information that robberies happened again and again. It also made this profession very risky. Men were not willing to take such a big risk, let alone a woman. However, this woman could choose this profession, which showed how powerful she was. Tai Qingyi, 23 years old, was called Iron Face and Benevolent Heart. Iron Face referred to the woman's serious face. Benevolent Heart referred to her bodhisattva's heart. According to the investigation of the Security Bureau, most of the money this woman earned was given to the poor people. This time, the reason why she wanted to come to the Yang Academy to study was that she lost her hand in the process of delivering an escort. As an armed escort, some people could work for a lifetime, but some people could only do it once. It all depended on her to ensure that the escorts were not lost. Unfortunately, although Tai Qingyi was good at fighting, the number of robbers she encountered was 3 times more than her. She was outnumbered and finally lost her escort, which made her lose her livelihood. She came to the Yang Academy to find a chance to survive and learn more skills. Of course, this had a lot to do with Yang Qindong's reputation outside. Otherwise, it would be difficult for an ordinary scholar to catch the attention of this extraordinary woman. Oh, right, when we were delivering the money in the morning, this woman was the one who shouted for the Duke to be righteous. Ah. Yang Qindong suddenly thought of something and said. Then he laughed heartily and stored this woman's information. Over the next 2 days, the 100 selected students were divided into groups. Some of them still needed to be observed, but some of them had been predetermined due to their various skills and specialties. It was just that they were unaware of it. Currently, the people outside were still waiting for the results in 2 days. The Wang residence in the capital. As the Minister of Personnel for many years, Wang Ji's influence was not only shown by his position, but also his hidden influence that people did not dare to underestimate. There was a saying in the Ministry of Personnel that the officials were a level higher than the officials, and the recommendation authority was in their hands. This caused some people to think of ways to curry favor with this master. As time passed, the saying that Wang Zhi's disciples were all over the world was no longer an adjective, but a fact. Chapter 247. Wang Zhi was so prestigious, but his most beloved grandson Wang Si did not go against his wishes and applied for the Yang Academy. After learning the truth, the minister flew into a rage in his study and called Wang Si and his son over to give them a good scolding. When it came to his grandson, Wang Zhi cared about him more than just love. He hoped that the power of the Wang family could continue, at least not fall, so he always paid attention to the teaching and training of his descendants. All along, Wang Si's performance was reassuring. At such a young age, he was already an editor of the Hanlin Academy and a 7th-rank official. If he was sent out of the capital, he would at least be a county magistrate. But who would have thought that after being suspended from his duties, he no longer had any desire to improve himself when he was reinstated? Not only did he eat and drink every day, he even applied for the Yang Family Academy behind Wang Zhi's back. How could Wang Zhi not be angry? In the study, Wang Zhi knelt on the ground after being reprimanded, but his face was full of dissatisfaction. "Grandfather, didn't you say that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has a promising future and is very talented? You also said that I should learn from him when I have time. Now that I have applied for the Yang Academy and will become his student, why are you not happy? I am now 27 years old, but I don't feel ashamed because my teacher is younger than me. You don't think that I have disgraced the Wang family because of this, do you?" "Shut up." Hearing his grandson's bluntness, Wang Zhi was so angry that his beard curled up. "What do you know? The Duke of Loyalty and Courage is indeed very talented and capable. I don't object to you befriending him and learning from him. But it is completely different to acknowledge him as your teacher. You have also heard of the saying that a teacher for a day is a father for life. This is equivalent to tying you and him together. If one day when the emperor wants to deal with him, won't you be implicated?" "Implicated? Grandfather, are you saying that the emperor wants to deal with the Duke of Loyalty and Courage?" Wang Si keenly sensed something and asked carefully. "Not now. But can't you see that the Duke of Loyalty and Courage's contributions are too great, so great that his contributions are enough to shake the emperor? Let me ask, which emperor in the world would allow someone with greater contributions than himself to exist? It's only a matter of time before we deal with him." Wang Zhi shook his head and said with certainty. What Wang Zhi said was not only what he thought, but also what the other officials thought. Everyone almost unanimously thought that the emperor would deal with Duke Zhongdan sooner or later. He didn't make a move now because there were still too many places that needed to be used. However, once the emperor's position was completely stabilized and his strength increased, how could a mountain contain 2 tigers? It was precisely because of this that many officials did not get too close to Yang Qindong, in case something happened to the loyal and courageous minister in the future. Someone would settle accounts after the autumn and find trouble with them. While everyone was thinking of ways to distance themselves from Yang Qindong, his own grandson had taken him as a teacher. No wonder Wang Zhi was so angry. "You haven't done anything to the Duke of Loyalty yet, have you? Besides, your grandson thinks highly of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. When he first entered the capital, I sensed that he wasn't ordinary. Along the way, the facts have proven this. Even the Walla's army was defeated by him. If His Majesty wants to do anything to him, he probably won't be able to get much out of it. If things go wrong, he might even end up injuring himself. If that's the case, your grandson has walked the right path today, taking the initiative before others." Wang Si didn't think much of his grandfather's words. In truth, with his intelligence, he had already analyzed the situation. After analyzing it, he had come to this decision. He believed that one couldn't put all their eggs in one basket. Otherwise, that would be the easiest way to cause problems. Wang Si's retort left Wang Zhi speechless. Only now did he understand that it wasn't that his grandson didn't understand, but that he knew everything, which was why he had come to this decision. "Seer, do you know how risky this is?" "Grandfather, your grandson has thought about it. But as long as your Majesty is still on the throne, the Wang clan will be fine, and your grandson will also be fine. Besides, your grandson isn't the only one taking the Duke of Loyalty as his teacher. If your grandson discovers that the Duke of Loyalty isn't as formidable as you imagined, your Majesty can use your authority to ground your grandson at any time. If that really happens and the matter gets out, even if something happens to him one day, no one will use this matter to make trouble for our Wang clan." Wang Si's frank words left Wang Zhi completely dumbfounded. He hadn't expected that his grandson, despite his young age, would be able to think of everything. If that was the case, what was there to worry about? As long as he discovered that Yang Qindong wasn't someone who could accomplish great things, he could bring his grandson back. Not only that, he could also tell the outside world that he had sent his grandson to investigate. If things went well, there was a high chance that this would turn into a great achievement. The worst-case scenario was already bearable. Wang Ji did not try to stop his grandson and agreed to it. Now, he was worried that his grandson would be accepted by Yang Qindong because of his relationship with him. If he couldn't enter the Yang Academy, then all of his thoughts would just be a bubble. This night, not only the Wang clan but many other people were worried about this problem. Even the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Lu Gue, who had sent out undercover agents, was worried. Although the 3 agents he sent out didn't seem to have any relationship with the embroidered uniform guard on the surface, it was true. As long as someone investigated carefully, they could still find some clues. If that was the case, wouldn't Yang Qindong think that he was a little girl and come to find trouble with him? For some reason, when he thought of Yang Qindong's strength, Lu Gui's heart was beating like a drum. This person wasn't someone to be trifled with. Furthermore, he never did business at a loss. At least, Lu Gue had never profited from his dealings with him. Lu Gue was still thinking about how to scheme against Yang Qindong. However, he didn't know that he had already been schemed against by someone else. In the prison of the embroidered uniform guard, the former Jianghu of the embroidered uniform guard, Tang Tong, was sitting on a bamboo mat with a depressed expression. Although it was called a bamboo mat, it was already in tatters. There was only a thin layer of it left. At this moment it was freezing outside and the imperial prison was also very cold. However, even in such an environment, Tang Tong didn't dare to raise any objections. As a former Jianghu, he knew the rules too well. Many times if you didn't speak or make a sound, you might suffer less because you were forgotten. However, if you insisted on standing up, these jailers wouldn't care about your previous position when they beat you up. He hugged his knees and sat on the ground. His eyes were listless and spiritless. Even when he heard the approaching footsteps, he didn't raise his head. It's time to eat. It was the jailer who gave out the food. When he walked past Tang Tong's room, a slightly moldy and black steamed bun was thrown out and rolled to his feet. This was Tang Tong's dinner. If it was outside, other than a beggar, it would probably be very difficult to attract anyone's attention. However, in the imperial prison, it was a good thing that could save lives and keep them alive. He was indeed a little hungry, but this black steamed bun really couldn't arouse his appetite. At this moment he couldn't help but hate his choice. Why did he believe that Jining had to stay in the capital? If he had made another choice at that time and followed Chao Jixiang to Nanjing, perhaps it would have been a different scene. He sighed in his heart and reached out to take the black steamed bun. Then he put it into his mouth with a hopeless expression. After taking a bite, the gloomy Tang Tong was still regretting his choice. However, after chewing a few times, his expression suddenly froze. Subsequently, his eyes widened as he vigilantly scanned his surroundings. When he saw that no one was paying attention to him, he carefully spat out the steamed bun that he had swallowed into his hands. Then he saw a small piece of paper that was sandwiched between his hands. There was actually a piece of paper in his steamed bun. From the looks of it, there seemed to be writing on it. Tang Tong's heart thumped. He didn't believe that this was caused by the chef's carelessness. His intuition told him that someone must be sending him a message. But who could send him a message? He was now almost a cripple. Who would think of him? And who would have such great ability to avoid the jailers and bribe them to send him a message? How much power did this person have? With all kinds of questions, Tang Tong carefully opened the paper in his hand. Immediately, 3 lines of small words entered his eyes. At this moment, his breathing began to quicken and soon, his eyes were filled with tears. Duke of Loyalty, it's actually the Duke of Loyalty. Yes, only he would be willing to use silver. He also has so much silver to do whatever he wants in the imperial prison. Thinking so in his heart, he quickly digested the contents of the paper. Not long after, his face began to change greatly. Then his expression slowly calmed down. After a while, his heartbeat calmed down and his emotions calmed down. Tang Tong put the paper back into his mouth and swallowed it. Then he stood up and held the iron cage with both hands and shouted outside. Come, I want to see Ji Qian. I have something important to report. Today was the day of the Yang Family Academy's enrollment. In the morning, there were many people gathered outside the Yang family manor. Although it couldn't compare to the Xiaocai High Scholar and Jinshe. But for many people, if they could enter the Yang Family Academy, it would be a fresh start in their lives. When most people had gathered and the sun slowly rose, a group of people walked out of the Yang family manor. They held a list written in red words in their hands. Under everyone's gaze, they pasted it horizontally at the entrance of the Yang Family Academy. A total of 100 names appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the list was posted, it immediately attracted many people to rush over and look up at the bottom of the list. There was only a 1/5 acceptance rate, and it was the early acceptance rate. Naturally, most people left with a face full of disappointment. But at the same time, there were some people who were excited. They had been chosen. In the eyes of these people, there were some who were excited, and some who were even arrogant and condescending. Chapter 248. Yongding Gate of the Capital. This gate was one of the closest outer gates of the capital to the Yang village. At this moment, 2 women were surrounded by several burly men. From the looks of it, they were completely surrounded, which attracted many commoners entering and leaving the city to watch. "Big sistery, it's my fault. I'll stay here. You should leave first. Don't ruin things," the petite woman said to the woman who was clearly half a head taller than her with a face full of grief and indignation. Her face was filled with anxiety and concern. He looked at the tall woman. Although she seemed to be in a hurry, she stood there with her legs like pillars. She didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. "Little sister Ping, how can big sister leave you alone? Besides, didn't you persuade me as well? The Yang Clan Academy and Dong Shui won't accept a girl as a disciple. I have no hope at all. Since that's the case, what difference does it make whether I look at the list or not? On the other hand, Yu Xiong's grandfather is the current Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. He's a favorite of the Emperor. If I offend him, I'll be in big trouble." The woman who spoke was Tai Qingyi. She used to be an escort and was nicknamed Iron Face Benevolent Heart by the people of the Jianghu. 3 days ago she applied to the Yang Clan Academy. The girl beside her was called Jiang Ping. She was her sworn sister of the opposite sex. The 2 of them used to be escorts together. Later, Tai Qingyi made a mistake and was fired from the escort agency. She followed her out. In desperation, she thought of applying to the Yang Clan Academy. In the Jianghu, the name of Dong Shui was equally well known. Although they didn't have much hope, they wouldn't lose anything by giving it a try, right? Today was supposed to be the day of the announcement, so the 2 girls were going to the Yang Academy 15 li south of the city to take a look. However, because they were in a hurry, they weren't careful when they walked. Coincidentally, they bumped into Yu Xiong, who was riding a horse at the city gate, and almost frightened his horse. Although they were saved by the Yu family servants, Yu Xiong was a young master and relied on his grandfather's high status and power. How could he suffer such a loss? He immediately demanded compensation from Jiang Ping. Then, when he saw that Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi were quite pretty, he pestered them even more and refused to let them go. He even ordered his servants to surround them tightly. From the looks of it, he was clearly going to take them away and do something improper. When Tai Qingyi refused to leave, Jiang Ping became even more anxious. She was afraid that she would delay her sister's important matter. When she looked at Yu Xiong, who was riding on the horse with his head held high, she blurted out, "Young Master Yu, please let my sister go first. She has already applied for the Yang Family Academy. This time she is going to look at the roll of pills. If she delays her important matter, can you bear the consequences?" Jiang Ping wanted to use the Dong Shui to suppress Yu Xiong. This was also based on the rules of nobility. After all, whether it was the name of the Dong Shui or the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, it was far from being comparable to a little young master who only knew how to rely on his family. There was nothing wrong with Jiang Ping's strategy, but she neglected a problem. Yu Xiong was a hedonistic young master. When he did things, he would rarely use his brain. If the person in front of him was Yang Qindong, perhaps he would retreat. However, how could the name of the Dong Shui scare him? Not to mention, at home, he had heard his grandfather unintentionally mention that there were still many scholars in the world who were against the Yang Family Academy. Thus he was even more fearless. "Oh, is that so? Then you are already a member of the Yang Family Academy?" Yu Xiong chuckled and said with a playful expression. "Not yet." Jiang Ping shook her head with a very honest attitude. "Since you are not, how can you use the name of the Yang Family Academy? Besides, even if you are really a member of the Yang Family Academy, you have to give this young master an explanation for startling this young master's horse, right? People always have to be reasonable. Haha, someone come, bring the 2 of them back. This young master wants to properly interrogate and investigate." A trace of urgency appeared on his face, showing that at this moment, Yu Xiong's brain was already filled with lust and he could not wait any longer. "What are you doing?" Seeing the numerous Yu family retainers closing in on the 2 of them, Tai Qingyi asked with a steely expression. She already had a premonition that something was going to happen, and with her skills she was not very afraid. However, she was worried that if she really made a move here in the capital, wouldn't she be committing a crime? If that was the case, there would be no place for her in this vast world. What are we doing? Bring you back. The surrounding Yu family servants, seeing that their young master had given the order, how could they still be polite? Each of them laughed sinisterly and began to walk closer with large strides. These people had been following Yu Xiong for a few years and were very clear about their young master's temperament. Since these two women had been bumped into, they would definitely not be able to escape from the devil's claws. Moreover, not long after, when he was tired of playing with them, he would reward them. Looking at the two of them, the servants could not help but have a good time. 7 to 8 servants surrounded them in a circle. Seeing that they were getting closer and closer, Tai Qingyi had no choice but to clench her fists in order to protect herself. From the looks of it, it was obvious that a fight was going to break out at any moment. As for what would happen after a fight, it would be a matter of taking one step at a time. The surrounding commoners, seeing that a fight was about to break out, were all worried for the two women. However, their words carried little weight, so they did not dare to act rashly. Otherwise, not only would they not be able to save the two women, they might even get themselves into trouble. However, even if some people were afraid, there were still some who were not. Seeing that the burly servants were about to surround the two women and capture them like eagles catching chicks, a shout came from outside the crowd. Stop! As the voice fell, it attracted the attention of the commoners in the crowd. Then, a man dressed in brocade strode over under the protection of two servants. As he walked, the middle-aged man said with a face full of anger, "In broad daylight, the world is clear and bright, and in the capital, what are you people trying to do? Even if you have broken the law, the yamen will judge. It's not up to you to privately punish, is it?" The man's face was full of righteousness and his words were reasonable. The servants actually forgot to take action and looked at each other. They were clearly shocked by the man's imposing manner. "Who are you?" Yu Xiong said with an unhappy expression. Just as the prey was about to fall into his hands, a troublemaker suddenly appeared. No one would be in a good mood. "And who are you?" In the face of Yu Xiong's arrogant question, the righteous man smiled. His name Yang had spread throughout the capital, and there weren't many people who didn't know his name. It was no wonder he had a playful smile on his face when he ran into a hothead who didn't know his identity. As Yang Qindong's fourth brother, his influence had recently flourished. Anyone who knew his identity, which one of them didn't give him enough face? He had face in front of outsiders, and he could enter and leave the immortal abode whenever he wanted. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, he only needed to say that he was going to pay the bill and he could leave. How comfortable was this kind of life? All of this had been brought about by his sixth brother, and Yang was very clear on this point. It was precisely because of this that he attached great importance to anything related to his sixth brother. When he found out that the Yang clan's academy was opening its enrollment today, he wanted to go and congratulate them. But he hadn't expected to run into such a situation at the city gates. Seeing that Yu Xiong was clearly bullying the weak, Yang felt indignant in his heart. Thus he shouted loudly and stepped forward. He originally thought that since he had only startled the horse and hadn't injured anyone, the other party would definitely give him face. But unexpectedly the other party didn't recognize him, and he couldn't help but laugh heartily. This young master is surnamed Yang, the fourth young master of the Yang clan. You better remember this well. Yang took the initiative to announce his name, hoping to turn the matter into a small one. Since he had already revealed his identity, as long as the other party knew how to do things properly, they would definitely give him face. In return, he would remember this person and return this favor sooner or later. "Ah, you're the fourth brother of the East Marshal. We're applying to enter the Yang Clan Academy. We were originally going to look at the rankings today, but we ended up startling the horse in our haste. Fortunately, nothing happened." Jiang Ping was overjoyed when she heard Yang announce his identity. Now that the Yang family had come, it seemed like nothing would happen today. Wait a moment? What do you mean nothing happened? I was so scared that my heart almost jumped out. I must have suffered some internal injuries, so you must come back with me. Once this young master finds a doctor and confirms that I'm fine, I'll let you go. Just when Jiang Ping thought that there was nothing to worry about, Yu Xiong suddenly spoke and used his injury as an excuse to bring Jiang Ping and Tai Qingyi back to the residence. From the beginning to the end, Yu Xiong was talking to Jiang Ping and didn't even look at Yang as if he was invisible. But in fact he had his own little plans and ideas. Yang, the fourth young master of the Yang clan, Yang Qindong's fourth elder brother. It was said that they had a good relationship. How could Yu Xiong not have heard of this? But because of the difference in age, the two didn't have much interaction and didn't know each other. Originally, everyone minded their own business. Yang Qindong was powerful and had done a lot of big things in a short period of time. He was seen as a rising star. But how could the Yu clan be bullied so easily? The Minister of Justice was in charge of all punishments in the world. His power was unimaginable. Even if it was Yang Qindong, if he offended the Yu clan, it would be very difficult for him and he would have to be careful. Of course, there was no need to make enemies. Yu Xiong was clear about this. Thinking himself clever, he didn't even look at Yang Yang. Instead, he stared at Jiang Ping and spoke. Chapter 249. When Yang Yang heard from Jiang Ping that they had applied for his sixth brother's Yang Clan Academy, he felt relieved. Since this matter concerned his sixth brother, he had to get involved. However, when he raised his head and saw that Yu Xiong didn't even look at him, he immediately became angry. "Brat, this young master is talking to you. Did you hear me? This young master is Yu Xiong. I'm sure fourth young master has heard of me. Today's matter has nothing to do with you, so it's best if you don't interfere. Men, arrest these two women who tried to harm this young master and bring them back for interrogation." Yu Xiong originally didn't want to talk to Yang Yang in order not to cause a conflict between the two clans. However, seeing that the other party didn't recognize him, he immediately revealed his identity and advised him not to meddle in other people's business. Otherwise he would only be losing face. Although Yu Xiong's words were ear-piercing to Yang Yang's ears, he felt somewhat helpless. He had naturally heard of Yu Xiong's name. After all, there were only a few high-ranking young masters in the capital. As long as one paid attention, they would know a little. As someone who had been in the capital for several decades, how could Yang Yang not know? Usually, everyone really had the idea of minding their own business. But if they really met face to face one day, they would just greet each other and it would be over. This was because the Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with. However, he didn't ask about the other party's identity before stepping forward. Now that he knew the other party's identity, if this matter were to spread, wouldn't people think that he was a person who bullied the weak and feared the strong? More importantly, this matter involved the students of the Yang Clan Academy. Although he didn't know if they were accepted, it was related to his sixth brother. If he shrank back now, it wouldn't be easy for him to deal with his sixth brother. The Yu clan wasn't to be trifled with, but he couldn't ignore this matter either. Thus Yang Yang was caught in a dilemma. More importantly, if he were to make a move now, he would be at a disadvantage since he only had two servants with him. If he were to be beaten up, even if he managed to regain his face later, it would still be a humiliating matter. Yang Yang was caught in a dilemma and didn't know whether to advance or retreat. For a moment he didn't say anything. When Yu Xiong saw this, he was naturally overjoyed. Thinking that the other party was afraid of his identity, he became even bolder and shouted at his servants, "What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for?" Since their master had given the order, the 8 servants no longer held back. They surrounded the 2 women and stretched out their arms to grab them. "Sister, what should we do?" Jiang Ping saw that the other party had made a move. If she didn't retaliate, then her power would be tied up tightly. Then she really didn't know what her fate would be. "Let's do it. Let's fight first and talk later." A look of determination flashed across Tai Chingy's face. She naturally knew what the consequences would be if she fought back. However, he had no other choice at this time. He couldn't just let the other party take action and allow himself to be captured. After Tai Chingy finished speaking, she took half a step back and dodged a big hand in front of her. Then she punched the man's elbow. The strong and precise force made the servant cry out in pain and retreat. He is actually a martial artist. When the others saw Tai Chingy's counterattack, they couldn't help but applaud. The commoners, who originally thought that things were not going well, were already prepared to complain about the 2 women's miserable fate. However, they didn't expect that the 2 women's skills were good and their counterattack was so sharp. This counterattack also fell into Yang Yang's eyes. His originally gloomy expression became much livelier in an instant. Good job. As long as the 2 of you can rush out, I will wait for you in front and go with you to the Yang family manor to clarify things." Yang Yang only brought 2 servants, afraid that they would be a burden to Tai Chingy. After saying this, he turned and walked towards the city gate of Yongding City. Originally, they didn't know what the result would be after fighting, but Yang Yang's words pointed them in the right direction. At this moment, the 2 women didn't hesitate and used both their hands and feet to dodge the Yu family servants who came rushing over. Tai Chingy's skills were good. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been chosen by Yang Qindong among the 500 people. It wasn't a problem to deal with 8 boorish men who relied on their status and background. With the help of her sister Jianghu, after just a few dozen moves, the 8 Yu family servants fell to the ground and wailed in pain. Yu Xiong was also frightened and retreated, hiding in the crowd. No one came to stop them. Tai Qingyi shouted to Jianghu, "Let's go quickly." The two of them quickly disappeared from the city gate. From the beginning to the end, the people from the warden's office of the 5 cities didn't appear. That was because they knew that Yu Xiong was about to do something bad. They were afraid that their appearance would delay his good deed, so of course, they would hide as far as possible. Unexpectedly, in the end, it helped Tai Qingyi and Jianghu. When Yu Xiong saw that his servants were beaten to the ground, he was afraid that the 2 women would take revenge on him. Naturally, he rode his horse and hid far away. After seeing the 2 women escape, he returned to his original arrogant appearance and shouted loudly, "Where are the soldiers? Is no one coming to deal with the beating?" Outside the city, Yang had only just arrived when Tai Qingyi and Jianghu rushed over from afar. Looking at the 2 girls, he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration, "Good skills. 4th brother is a person who loves talents. I'm sure that after knowing how powerful you are, he will accept you as a student of the academy. How about this? Follow me first." Yang Family Village. At the gate of the Yang Family Academy, some people were happy and some were sad. But no matter what kind of mood they had, the facts couldn't be changed. Many people left in disappointment, while some happily took things that could prove their identity and stepped into the academy. Last time they only came to the outer courtyard of the academy. There, they were stunned by the 2 pressure wells that they had never seen before. But when they entered the inner courtyard of the academy, the spacious school building made of cement and the classrooms with expensive glass windows appeared in front of them. Especially the row of neatly arranged dormitories. It was said that they were specially prepared for students. There was even a canteen for eating, a laundry room for washing clothes, and some cold fitness equipment that they had never seen before. But at this moment they felt so warm and considerate. After entering the inner courtyard of the Yang Family Academy, the words moral, intelligence, physique, beauty and work, and science and technology is the #1 productivity, were sprayed on the walls, giving people a feeling of vitality and freshness. Everyone only knew a little about these phrases that they had never heard of before, but they could vaguely understand them. Everyone couldn't help but feel a sense of longing for the future. Inside the academy, there were already people in charge of receiving people. Any student who was accepted would receive a special room and a certain number of meal tickets. According to the staff, after coming here they had to rely on themselves. No one was allowed to bring servants, and they had to rely on themselves for food, clothing, housing, and transportation. No one dared to go against this requirement. First, the number of young masters who could be accepted was limited. They were in the minority among the 100 people and couldn't cause any trouble. Second, the rules were written very clearly. Every student had 100 points of conduct. Once all of their points were deducted, that would be the time they had to leave. The rules also wrote that no matter what the reason was, if one didn't follow the rules of the academy, at least 2 points would be deducted. If one was the leader and the situation was serious, they might be directly expelled. Since it was written in the rules, it was a hard rule that no one dared to go against. So even though they were somewhat unwilling, no one raised any objections. Some of the young masters, including Wang Si, took the initiative to send their servants out of the academy. They also told them to tell their families that there would be a day off every 7 days in the academy. At that time they would naturally go home to take a look. The people who were accepted received their plates one by one. Then, under the guidance of the staff, they first received their own bedding, meal tickets, and other daily necessities. Then they were led to their respective rooms. According to these people, before lunch, the academy's principal, who was also the loyalty guild, would speak to them. At that time, the real life of a student would begin. And before that, everyone could temporarily relax and properly rest in their rooms. Although they didn't know what the real life of a student was, seeing how determined the staff was, they felt the pressure and cherished the short time they could rest before the official start. In the principal's office, Yang Qindong was listening to Tiger's Main's work report. "Young master, after the announcement, there are 100 students who should have arrived. There are 98 who actually arrived. Please give us your instructions." "There are 2 who didn't arrive? Who are they?" Yang Qindong asked with a puzzled expression. This time the people who signed up were all willing. Since they had the opportunity, why didn't they appear? His intuition told him that something unexpected must have happened. Reporting to the 6th young master, they are Tai Qingyi and her sworn sister, Jianghu. Tiger's Mane scratched his head, also confused. If it were someone else, it would be fine. Perhaps they would be obstructed by their family or even friends and change their minds at the last minute. But these two people had been seriously investigated. After losing their job as escorts, they had nowhere else to go. How could they not report after being accepted? It's them? After hearing the answer, Yang Qindong's face showed a trace of seriousness. Obviously, he had also thought of what Tiger's Mane thought. But soon, he shook his head and said, there is no reason for them to not appear after being accepted. If there is a possibility, then there is only one. They must have met with an accident. How about this? Arrange for the Security Bureau to investigate. Chapter 250. As soon as Yang Qindong finished speaking, Beta Persei's rough voice came from outside the door. Young Master Yang Si is here. He said he has something urgent to report. Let him in. After Yang Qindong nodded, the door was pushed open from the outside. Yang Si, wearing a pure cotton robe, walked in. Young Master, Fourth Master is here. He also brought two girls with him. Behind them are some soldiers from the warden's office. What's going on? Hu Meng saw that Yang Si's words were a little out of place, so as their leader he asked, what do you think? Shaking his head, Yang Si also had a puzzled look on his face. Obviously, he also did not understand what was going on. Yang Qindong, on the other hand, had already stood up and said, whether it's a blessing or a curse, we'll deal with it accordingly. How about this? Immediately gather all the students. This young master will use this matter to teach everyone a lesson. With Yang Qindong's instructions, soon a sharp whistle sounded. Soon, the 98 students who had entered the room hurriedly rushed out. They were familiarizing themselves with the rules of the academy, and one of them was to obey orders and follow instructions. One of the instructions was that everyone had to gather when the whistle sounded. No matter what you were doing, whether it was sleeping, eating, or urinating, you had to stop and gather. Otherwise, depending on the severity of the situation, you would be deducted more than 2 to 10 points. There was a total of 100 points, and no one wanted to be deducted just like that. Therefore, after hearing the whistle, whether it was the ordinary people or the young master, they all rushed out of the room at the first moment. The 98 people stood in a row according to their positions from the first to the last. Just as they were seated, Yang Qindong, wearing a green cotton robe, appeared in front of everyone under the protection of Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei. Alright, since you're all here, follow me out to watch the fun. As a student of the Yang Academy, the first thing they had to have was courage. In the future, Yang Qindong would have many examples to prove their courage. With Yang Qindong as the leader and the other students as support, a group of more than 100 people walked out of the Yang Academy. When they arrived at the gate, they saw Yang Qindong, two servants, Tai Qingyi, and Jiang Ping confronting dozens of soldiers from the 5 cities warden's office. As soon as the group of more than 100 people walked out, they attracted the attention of these two groups. When he saw that the leader was the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong, Yang Yang's originally tense face relaxed a lot. Sixth brother, I'm here. Fourth brother. Seeing Yang Yang waving his hand at him, Yang Qindong, who originally had a confident face, had a hint of warmth in his eyes. Those who knew him knew that he would only show such a kind look to his family and the people he cared about. Sixth brother, I'm afraid I've caused you trouble this time. Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with self-blame as he watched Yang Qindong walk closer and closer. Fourth brother, you don't have to say that. You and I are brothers. Your business is naturally my business. What's going on? Yang Qindong said as he casually glanced at the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office. With just a glance, the dozens of soldiers on the opposite side quickly lowered their heads. After the 2 consecutive defeats against Tile, there was no one who didn't know about Yang Qindong. There was no one who didn't know about the military god. It was because of the war god's existence that not only did they not suffer any casualties, but they also made a lot of military achievements and gained a lot of benefits. Some of the soldiers' living conditions improved by more than a level, and all of this was thanks to Yang Qindong. For this reason, many soldiers' families also quietly set up a longevity memorial arch for Yang Qindong in order to express their gratitude in their hearts. But now they wanted to cause trouble for him. It was no wonder these people didn't dare to look Yang Qindong in the eye. These people lowered their heads and Yang Qindong withdrew his cold gaze. He then looked at Yang Yang and said, Fourth brother, what's going on? Why are they following you? So I let the 2 of them explain. Yang Yang didn't know how to explain it, so he left it to Leng Qingyi and Jiang Ping. Yang Qindong had already noticed the 2 of them, but the difference in status was too great, so he didn't say anything. Now that his 4th brother pointed out the 2 of them, he used the momentum to look at them and said with an encouraging gaze, Speak, what's going on? Greetings Dong Shuai. Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping were excited to see their idol standing in front of them, so they bowed and greeted him. Then Jiang Ping, who was more eloquent, explained the whole sequence of events to him. When Tiger's Mane heard that the matter involved Yu Xiong, the grandson of the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue, he signaled to one of his subordinates behind him, and the subordinate quickly disappeared. Soon, a note was brought over and Tiger's Mane handed it to Yang Qindong. The note recorded some things about Yu Xiong, but because he wasn't a big shot, the record wasn't very detailed. There were only a few words. Yu Xiong, the third of the brothers. Characteristics: there's nothing he doesn't know about eating, drinking, and having fun. He often deceives others. Once, in order to get a woman, he forced her husband to write a divorce letter and escape far away from home to protect himself. When he saw this, Yang Qindong's eyes flashed with coldness. Tell everyone to find the person. Understood. Tiger's Mane had enough chemistry with Yang Qindong, so he naturally knew who he was referring to. At this moment, Jiang Ping also explained the cause and effect of the matter. Then she and Tai Qingyi looked at Yang Qindong. Although they didn't say anything, they knew very well that if Dong Shuai didn't care about them, they would be taken away by the 5 cities warden's office for punishment. In fact, it wasn't just Tai Qingyi. Fourth brother Yang Qindong and the 98 new students of the Yang Academy were all looking at Yang Qindong, the dean of their academy. When Jiang Ping explained the cause and effect of the matter, they heard everything clearly, so they were naturally angry at Yu Xiong's actions. He just accidentally startled the horse and didn't cause any harm. Either he compensate you with some silver, or he apologize in front of everyone and admit his mistake. Why did he have to take people away and do such a beastly thing? This was really going too far. Especially some of the students who were originally from poor families, they had encountered such things in the past. Through this matter, it was as if he had seen himself in the past. Naturally, he felt like he had a common enemy. Sensing the rising anger around him, Yang Qindong calmly turned around and looked at everyone, including Tai Qingyi and the other 2 women. He said, I originally planned to gather everyone for a talk before lunch. Since there is such an opportunity, I will tell you in advance. The matter involved the Yang Academy, so all the students naturally put up their earphones. This was the first time they heard the dean speak, so of course they were very careful. Seeing that everyone was so serious, Yang Qindong nodded with satisfaction. He appreciated such an attitude. Since that was the case, he wouldn't be stingy with his words. Very good. Since everyone is able to enter the Yang Family Academy, it proves that everyone has a kind of fate. Although I can't guarantee that everyone will become the first batch of students of the academy, I will teach you with all my heart as long as you are here. The first lesson I will teach you today is the word, righteousness. What is righteousness? It refers to the atmosphere of righteousness and spreading positive energy. Righteousness is a type of positive energy that is reflected in the righteousness of people. Righteousness is to walk the right path. It is to be filled with positive, righteous atmosphere. With a powerful voice, Yang Qindong continued, people who live between heaven and earth must be indomitable and have righteousness in their bodies. Only then, no matter what situation you are in, can you hold your head high and be respected by others. As long as you have righteousness in your heart, you can do things with a clear conscience. Only then can you face any difficulties and problems and solve them. Today, Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping only walked a little too fast because they were anxious and didn't hurt anyone. This was originally a trivial matter, but some people always thought that they were a cut above others, always thinking that they could do whatever they wanted. Thus, they took the opportunity to create trouble, wanting to use extreme means to achieve extreme goals. This is the embodiment of not having righteousness. At the same time, it is also because there are too few people with righteousness that these people can survive and do whatever they want on the streets. I don't know if everyone has thought about it, but if everyone has righteousness in their hearts and can stand up to criticize Yu Xiong, what kind of scene would that be? Presumably, from then on, there will be no place for evil people in the world, and there will be fewer and fewer unjust things in the world, right? Therefore, in the first lesson I will talk about the understanding of righteousness and the use of righteousness. At the same time, I will ask everyone to have righteousness. Not only must you have righteousness, but you must spread it to others. One day, when everyone has righteousness, then the world will be peaceful and the people will be prosperous. I look forward to the arrival of that day. Good. As soon as Yang Qindong finished his words, the crowd, led by Wang Si, began to cheer loudly. Waves of warm applause followed. Seeing that everyone agreed with his point of view, Yang Qindong smiled at everyone in satisfaction. Then he turned to Tai Qingyi and Jiang Ping. The 2 of you have been accepted by the Yang Academy. Your names are on the list. Now, please enter the academy to collect your things and understand the relevant rules. Chapter 251. Tai Qingyi and the other girl, who were originally very excited by the righteous words, showed joy and excitement when they heard Yang Qindong say that they were accepted. They immediately agreed happily. Just as they were about to enter the academy, they remembered that the people from the 5 cities warden's office were right in front of them. If they couldn't solve this problem, how could they study in peace in the academy? Noticing that the two girls' footsteps were a little hesitant, Yang Qindong nodded lightly. These two had not been blinded by the joy in front of them, so it could be seen that they were still very rational. After his good impression of the two girls improved a little, Yang Qindong suddenly turned to the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office 30 steps away and said, "I presume you all know this duke?" Yes, we greet the Duke of Loyalty and Courage." After being asked by Yang Qindong, these people did not dare to pretend to be deaf and mute. They immediately lowered their heads and said respectfully, "Very good, since you know this duke you can go back. If Yu Xiong asks, just say that the two of them are students of the Yang Academy. If you want to talk about it, just talk to this duke. Of course, if you want to catch people, you can catch this duke first, understand?" The more he spoke, the more serious Yang Qindong's expression became. This seriousness also caused the expressions of the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office to change greatly. They repeatedly said that they did not dare and then turned to leave very decisively. What kind of joke was this? If they wanted to catch people, they would first catch Yang Qindong. Even if they had the courage, they would not dare to do this. If they really did it, not to mention whether they could do it or not, when they really returned home, their wives would not let them go. Their consciences would not be able to live with themselves. The soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office left because of Yang Qindong's words. They left so happily without a trace of reluctance. This made all the students very excited after seeing this. This was their dean. He had righteousness in his heart and was not afraid of any powerful people. They did not know when they would be able to be like this, facing all difficulties with one word and solving them with one word. A crisis was thus resolved. The 100 students all returned to their positions and walked towards the Yang Clan Academy. Yang Qindong came to Yang Qindong's side and asked with concern, "Sixth brother, will there be any trouble?" "What kind of trouble? We weren't in the wrong to begin with. It was all that Yu Xiong's fault. It was just a child's mischief. It wasn't a big deal. This time I really have to thank fourth brother. If you hadn't appeared in time, I'm afraid that things would have gotten out of hand. At that time, it would have been much more troublesome to solve. Why don't we enter the courtyard and have a drink together?" Yang Qindong chuckled. Hearing that not only was there no mistake, but there was also merit, Yang Yang's high-hanging heart could finally settle down. Good. It's rare for sixth brother to be so considerate. Fourth brother will drink with you. Let me try your delicious food. Yang Yang's heart was clear. Everyone said that all the delicacies in the world were in the immortal abode. Actually, that was not the case. The delicacies of the Yang family manor were the ones that were on a whole new level. At that moment, the two brothers chatted and laughed as they walked towards the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. Just as they arrived at the entrance, a beautiful girl blocked their path. "Dong Shui, I also want to enter the Yang clan academy to study." The person who came was Junko. She had just witnessed everything that happened at the entrance of the academy and heard Yang Qindong's understanding of the word morality. While she was excited, she also believed that the academy must be a very mysterious place. She would definitely be able to learn a lot there. Therefore, she decided to recommend herself and asked to enter the academy as a student. In order to achieve this goal, Junko was prepared to be rejected. She used her seemingly weak body to block in front of Yang Qindong. She looked as if she would not let him pass if he did not agree. In the entire Yang family manor, there were not many people who dared to do this. Other than the few matriarchs, no one else would do this. Otherwise, the consequences would definitely make you regret it for the rest of your life. Junko was a beautiful girl. Perhaps this was her advantage. She used her body to block in front of Yang Qindong. She had no intention of letting him pass. Sixth brother, I will go in first. I can already smell the wine, haha. Yang Qindong said tactfully. He knew that if he continued to stay here, it would only make things awkward for Yang Qindong. Therefore, he found an excuse and took the lead to walk into the inner courtyard of the Yang family manor. You guys go in too. Yang Qindong looked at Tiger's mane, who was still standing beside him. He only turned his head to the side. At this time he was not alert at all. Yang Qindong shook his head and said aloud, "Yes, young master." Tiger's mane couldn't wait to leave. After answering, he strode away. At the same time the first guard, Chiovi, and the others followed behind him. Soon only Yang Qindong and Junko were left. He finally asked, "Why did you decide to study in the Yang family academy? Your bodyguard's body is fine. It should be time for you to leave." "No. I'm not leaving." Junko shook her head and said firmly. "Reason?" Yang Qindong's tone was cold as he asked. "Reason?" Junko's beautiful big eyes turned and said, "I admire the culture of the great Ming dynasty. It's that simple to learn the advanced knowledge here. Then after you learn it, go back and spread it to Japan?" Yang Qindong seemed to be very specific. "Yes." Junko didn't want to admit it, but she didn't know why. In front of Yang Qindong she told him the truth. Perhaps she also knew that she couldn't lie to him with her strength. "You're very honest." Yang Qindong first approved of Junko's attitude, but then he said, "But why should I accept you? What's in it for me to take you in?" This. Junko's eyes kept blinking. At this moment she really wanted to tell Yang Qindong that she was the princess of Japan, but she was worried that once he knew her identity, Yang Qindong would report this matter to the imperial court of the great Ming dynasty. In that case things would be a little troublesome. This was not what she wanted. If she couldn't use her identity to pressure him, then she could only use money. Junko said, "I can give you a lot of gold and silver. Give me a number." "A lot of gold and silver. You should have some understanding of me these days. You should know that I am not short of money. In fact, I have a lot of money." Yang Qindong didn't seem to agree with Junko's reason. When she said this, Junko's face turned pale. That's right, Yang Qindong might not be the richest person in the great Ming dynasty, but if they were to talk about who was the best at making money, no one would dare to say they were the best if Yang Qindong claimed to be second. Junko's face was still changing. On the other side, Yang Qindong had already opened his mouth and said, "But who would dislike money? Since you want me to give you a price, I will give you 10,000 taels a day to study with me." What? Even though she had made some preparations and was even waiting for Yang Qindong to ask for an exorbitant price, she was still extremely shocked when she heard that it was 10,000 taels of silver a day. Her cherry lips opened so wide that she could swallow a pigeon egg. Isn't this too much? But you asked me to give you a price." Yang Qindong's face didn't change, but he was laughing in his heart. He seemed to like the feeling of teasing Junko. "I asked you to give me a price, but 10,000 taels a day is still too expensive. I can't afford it." Junko had the support of the Japanese royal family. Naturally, she didn't lack money since she was a child. But 10,000 taels a day still scared her. Because even if the entire royal family added up all their expenses, they wouldn't be able to reach this amount in a day. If she reported the amount of money back to her country, she was afraid that she wouldn't be able to get through her father's trial. Seeing Junko being so honest and saying that she couldn't afford it, Yang Qindong had to shake his head and said, "Then there is no other way. You asked me to give you a price, but you can't afford it. You might as well not go to the academy to study." After saying that, Yang Qindong was about to leave, but Junko still stood in front of him, blocking his way. "So 1,000 taels a day, this is already the limit I can pay." As if she had made up her mind, Junko said these words with great effort, and her face was extremely serious. 1,000 taels a day in a month, it would be more than 30,000 taels. This was Junzi. Before she came to the great Ming dynasty, her father gave her a lot of good things, and some of them were even prepared for her future dowry. If it were other people, they wouldn't even dare to say such words. 1,000 taels a day, it seems to be a lot. Okay, it's a deal. But I'll say the ugly words first. As soon as you enter the academy, you have to listen to me. If you can't bear the hardships and take the initiative to withdraw, then don't come looking for trouble. Yang Qindong originally wanted to scare Junko. If he wanted to use this person, even if she didn't pay him a single tael, he would still agree. He just deliberately delayed it. But he didn't expect that there would be an unexpected gain. 1,000 taels a day was naturally nothing for him, but if there was money to be earned, then he would be a fool. "No problem, I won't withdraw. I will stick to it. Thank you, Dong Shui." Finally getting what she wanted, Junko's face was full of joy. She then turned around and walked away happily. She even seemed to be humming a famous Japanese song. Yang Qindong was a capable person, and a very capable one at that. If such a person could be used by the emperor, he would definitely become the most powerful arm. At this moment, if he stayed here, it meant that he had more opportunities to come into contact with Yang Qindong, and the possibility of recruiting him for his own use would naturally increase. Although Yang Qindong was already the loyal duke and the hope was not great, at least there was hope, right? Chapter 252. the yamen of the 5 cities warden's office. The people who had gone to Yang Qindong's manor had rushed back and clearly explained the intentions of the loyal Duke Yang Qindong. Commander Sun Tong, who was on duty, said to Yu Xiong with a serious expression, "Young Master Yu, you have heard the matter. We are powerless to do anything. Please go back." Yu Xiong's expression was naturally somewhat ugly at this moment. He had thought that his grandfather was the current Minister of Justice and that no one would dare to not give him face. In the past he had also done some outrageous things, but in the end nothing had happened. He had eaten and drank as he should. But today, after meeting Yang Qindong, everything had changed. The 5 cities warden's office had actually spoken to him in such a state. It was clear that they did not want to interfere. "Very good, Commander Sun, right? Your attitude of shirking responsibility is very bad. I will report this to your superior, and I will also tell my grandfather," Yu Xiong said with a fierce expression. He had thought that if he brought up his grandfather, Sun Tong would at least be nervous if not afraid. But instead he stood there and did not even raise his eyes. On the contrary, he kindly advised him, "Young Master Yu, let me give you a piece of advice. You should first explain this matter to your grandfather before deciding what to do. Otherwise, if you carelessly do something and implicate your entire family, that would be really bad." Sun Tong was only advising him with good intentions. Of course, he did not want to offend the current Minister of Justice. But when Yu Xiong heard these words, his expression changed again and again. He felt that Sun Tong was clearly looking down on him, including his grandfather. He immediately flung his sleeves angrily and left. It could be seen that at this moment he was very angry. After leaving the yamen of the 5 cities warden's office, Yu Xiong looked at the people walking on the street and swore in his heart that no matter what, he would get back at them today. Wasn't he just a loyal duke who had made some contributions? Although he had a title, which duke, marquis and count really had great power? In the end, didn't the important officials control everything in the imperial court? Back then, no matter how awe-inspiring Jianghu was in the end, didn't he still have to tuck his tail between his legs and behave himself? This Yang Qindong had become a duke at such a young age, yet he didn't want to restrain himself. Instead, he wanted to go against him, so he had to let him know how powerful he was. He thought about how he had many friends in the capital, and he was also quite open-minded and had made friends with people from all walks of life. It shouldn't be a problem for him to teach Yang Qindong a lesson. At this moment, Yu Xiong wanted to kill. Although he did not say that he wanted to kill Yang Qindong, he decided to teach him a lesson and let him know who he could not afford to provoke. But he didn't even think about it. How could someone who could reach this position at the age of 20 be so easy to get along with? Was it appropriate to treat such an opponent as an ordinary playboy? Would it work? Yu Xiong quickly left the 5 cities warden's office and appeared on a bustling street. Here he found a big gangster named Lu San. Black and white had existed in all eras. The only difference was which side was more powerful. Lu San was one of the representatives of black. This man had lived in the capital since he was a child, and because he was ruthless and brave enough to only recognize money and not people, he had managed to carve out a small world for himself, becoming a character in the nearby streets. It was rumored that this man had more than 100 subordinates and more than 1,000 ordinary subordinates. Yu Xiong came and sat face to face with Lu San at the table. A large stack of banknotes issued by the Yang family bank was placed there. The thick stack was more than 20,000 taels. Looking at the money that was enough for him to risk his life for 2 to 3 years, Lu San's eyes were red. He was like a vicious tiger that had seen its prey and could not control himself. Teach a person a lesson and this is all yours. Seeing Lu San's drooling appearance, Yu Xiong was much more confident. Okay, please tell me who it is. Money makes the world go round. At this moment, Lu San had a very good explanation. For money he could even kill his own parents, not to mention dealing with an outsider. East Marshal Yang Qindong. Yu Xiong said his name. The moment Yu Xiong announced his name, Lu San's face twitched violently. He thought that if a high-ranking young master like Yu Xiong was willing to take out so much money for him, it would not be simple. The person he had to deal with would also not be a nameless pawn. But he did not expect it to be the East Marshal. Even ordinary people knew the name of the East Marshal, not to mention people like Lu San who mingled in the underworld. There was even a period of time when he thought of relying on this loyal duke. But later he was afraid of losing his freedom and gave up on this idea. Now that Yu Xiong said that he wanted to deal with this person, his expression changed greatly. But when he saw the banknotes on the table, he made a decision. As the saying goes, how can one catch a tiger cub without entering the tiger's den? If he wanted to earn money, he had to take risks, especially for people like him who were in the underworld. Young Master Yu, the East Marshal, hides in the Yang clan manor every day. It won't be easy to deal with him. From what I know, even the embroidered uniform guards were unable to gain anything from the Yang clan manor. I'm afraid that you don't have to deal with Yang Qindong. You can deal with the people important to him as well. You just have to teach him a lesson. Yu Xiong had thought about it a long time ago. The success rate of causing trouble for the Yang clan manor was too low. Even 20,000 silver wouldn't be enough. It was better to deal with the people close to him, such as the managers of the Immortal Abode, Realm Beyond Heaven, and the Yang clan bank. Because of their work, they had to appear in the capital every day. It should be easy to cause trouble for them. Alright, it's a deal. Lu San was relieved when he heard that he didn't have to deal with Yang Qindong, but the people close to him as well. If that was the case, there would be too many people to deal with, and the money would be even easier to get. Yu Xiong left. After leaving behind the money, he confidently left. Lu San called over a few of his trusted aides and told them about the deal he had just received. When his trusted aides heard that they wanted to deal with the East Marshal, they became rather nervous. It was clear that they had heard of this man before. But when they heard Lu San say that Yu Xiong was willing to take out 20,000 taels of silver, they immediately threw the danger to the back of their minds. These people were originally people who had their heads on their belts. As long as they were given enough money, other than the current emperor, they would dare to make a move on anyone. With the money to pave the way, they quickly reached an agreement. After much deliberation, they decided to target one of the managers of the Immortal Abode, Madame Xue. Madame Xue was Yang Qindong's third wife, and her status was not low. If something happened to her, Yang Qindong would definitely be heartbroken. If they could persuade her, they would have completed the mission Yu Xiong had set for them. Of course, there was an even more important reason for choosing this person. This person's beauty had made their hearts itch for a long time. If they could capture this person and satisfy their own needs, wouldn't that be killing two birds with one stone? As for how Yang Qindong would deal with them after they succeeded, if worst came to worst, they would just take the money and leave the capital. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Moreover, the true mastermind behind the scenes was Yu Xiong. Even if he wanted to make a move, the East Marshal should be dealing with this person. Why would he care about small fries like them? Lu San, who didn't understand Yang Qindong's temperament, believed himself to be a pile of dung, filthy and stinky. People like them, as long as they had some status, wouldn't have too many interactions with them. If something really happened, they would just be chased down by some officials on the surface. They had plenty of ways to deal with soldiers to ensure their own safety. Just like in the past, they had also done things to target nobles, but hadn't they still managed to survive until now? Treating Yang Qindong as an ordinary aristocrat was a mistake that Lu San and the others made in their understanding. What they didn't know was that there were some things that couldn't be done or even thought about. Otherwise, the consequences would be far beyond what they could bear. Now that they had a common understanding, they began to make preparations. First, they would familiarize themselves with Madame Snow's route, and then they would find a suitable opportunity to strike. As Yang Qindong's third wife, Madame Snow was currently very busy. She was born as a singer and she had a good singing voice, so she was like a fish in water in the Immortal Abode. Moreover, the world had been peaceful recently, and the Immortal Abode had flourished once more. It had reached a level of prosperity that was hard to come by. The play she and Madame Xiang had written about the war between the war god and the Walla had become even more popular. This success in her career only made Madame Snow love Yang Qindong even more. She would never forget who had given her all of this. For this reason, no matter how busy she was, she would always make a trip back to the Yang clan manor every 3 days just to see her beloved. It was yet another busy day. From the time the Immortal Abode opened in the morning until nightfall, there were no empty seats. Madame Snow also busied herself for the better part of the day. After dinner, she left everything to Madame Xiang. The two of them had long since reached an agreement that unless there was something important, they would return to the Yang clan manor in batches to spend the night. After explaining everything, Madame Snow entered a soft sedan chair. As soon as she entered, she was overcome by fatigue, and before she knew it, she had fallen asleep. The 4 people carrying the sedan chair were all Lung Feng. This was the result of Yang Qindong's cautious personality. Even though the world was at peace and the Walla had not only retreated, but had also begun to trade with the great Ming, Dai Zong was also busy training the new army. It seemed like no one would do anything to him, but Yang Qindong was still very protective of his wives. He was well aware that there were some things that he couldn't afford to make a mistake, because a single mistake would leave him with lifelong regret. Chapter 253. There were 4 cold-edged soldiers carrying the palanquin, as well as 6 more to the left and right. This was an entire squad of cold-edge soldiers. Unless 40 to 50 enemies suddenly appeared, their safety was guaranteed. Squad Captain Qing Qian. He was grateful that the 6th young master had entrusted the task of protecting the 3rd madam to him. This was a form of trust. There were many squad captains in the Cold Edge, but he had been given this assignment. How could he not do his best? Qing Qian even had a feeling that as long as he did his job well, his future would be limitless. He would be able to lead even more soldiers and win even more battles. This was one of his lifelong wishes. The 3rd madam boarded the palanquin. Qing Qian said, "Rise." The palanquin lifted off the ground, and the squad of 10 left the immortal abode, slowly making their way toward the Yongding Gate. The moment they left the busiest street of the capital, one of the cold-edge soldiers sensed something and whispered to Qing Qian, "Squad captain, behind us." Qing Qian raised his right hand slightly. It was just a simple movement, but Qing Qian used sign language to tell the soldier that he knew that someone was following him. Given the strength of the cold-edge soldiers, they had sensed that they were being watched not long after leaving the immortal abode. But the other party's methods weren't bad, so they couldn't be sure who was following them. How many were there? Only then did they carefully observe their surroundings. Now that they were on a slightly quieter street, this feeling only grew stronger. There wasn't much time left until the curfew, so the number of people on the street was dwindling. This made it difficult for the people following them to hide themselves perfectly. Qing Qian sensed it. When he raised his right hand, he saw that besides the 4 soldiers carrying the palanquin, the other 5 soldiers were silently inspecting their weapons and equipment. Although he didn't know who these people were, they were still in the dark. But for the sake of safety, it was never wrong to make preparations in advance. As the squad captain and commander, Qing Qian had already taken out the 95-style saber wrapped in cloth and removed the safety pin. He also took out the night vision goggles from his satchel and put them on. Not all cold fronts were equipped with such equipment. However, Qing Qian's squad was tasked with protecting the 3rd madam. Due to the special nature of their mission, they were able to enjoy such treatment. As a result, they had a pair of extremely bright eyes in the dark, allowing them to see everything around them very clearly. It was precisely because they could see everything clearly that those who were following them in the dark had nowhere to hide. When he noticed that there were 4 or 5 people following him, Qing Qian's breathing quickened and his heartbeat quickened. He couldn't tell if he was excited or worried. They were excited because there was a battle to fight. Their hands had been itching for a while. Now that someone had delivered themselves to their doorstep, of course they would go on a killing spree. What he was worried about was that the 3rd madam was in the sedan. If she lost even a strand of hair, he was afraid that it would be his fault. At that time he would not have the face to face the 6th young master, and all his future would end today. Regardless of whether he was excited or nervous, after taking a few deep breaths, Qing Qian calmed his racing heartbeat and tried his best to maintain his best condition. At this moment, not only Qing Qian, but even the soldiers under his command were quickly making adjustments. During a great battle, one state of mind determined their success or failure. The more relaxed they were, the more they could unleash their strength to their normal level or even to the extreme. This was proven during their training when they joined the Cold Front. While Qing Qian and the 5 soldiers were making preparations before the battle, the 4 Cold Front members carrying the sedan were also searching for a safe spot. The so-called safe spot was the best place to ensure the 3rd madam's safety. For such a place it was best to be in a corner. The more hidden it was, the better it was. Generally, a blind spot could reduce the number of points of attack. The best blind spot was when there were 3 walls and only one side would be attacked. Currently, the 4 of them were constantly searching in the dark night. Finally, the 4 of them resonated at the entrance of a large mansion with the word, Gao, written on it. For such a large and wealthy family, the entrance of the mansion was very sturdy and wide. If they could hide here, the number of points of attack would be very small. After coming to a consensus, the 4 of them began to quicken their pace. Qing Qian and the other 5 also protected them as they quickly moved toward the Gao mansion's entrance. Their sudden acceleration and abnormal behavior attracted the attention of the people who were secretly following them. This time, in order to hit the target with one strike, more than 20 people in the city were responsible for the follow-up work nearby. More than 30 people were lying in ambush on the only way to the Yang village outside the city. They had found the best place to fight. When there were open mountains all around, they believed that they could catch their target, Madame Snow. Whether it was because they had underestimated the enemy or because they were overconfident, after Lu San arranged everything, he took 2 of his trusted subordinates to a brothel and began to have fun. In his opinion, with such a delicate arrangement, Madame Snow would be captured easily. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before this fairy-like woman would appear beside his bed. Because of their carelessness, they did not go to the scene to give orders. When Cheng Qian and the others suddenly changed their behavior, more than 20 people in charge of this part of the city were dumbfounded. They did not understand how the enemy had discovered them. They also did not know what to do next. Should they take action, wait and see, or wait for an opportunity? While these people were still at a loss, Cheng Qian had already made the decision to fight back. He took the initiative to strike first to gain the upper hand. When the sedan came to the stone pillar beside the Gao Mansion's entrance, the 4 Lung Feng who carried the sedan quickly took off the 95 style from their backs. Then they stood next to each other in the only blind spot where they could attack. They blocked the sedan as a human shield, just in case Madame Wei San was safe. When the 4 of them had finished all this, Cheng Qian had already given the order to shoot. However, the first shot was not aimed at the enemy, but at the lanterns hanging high in the street. Bang! In such a quiet night, the gunshot was so clear and soul-shaking. With one shot, a lantern hanging high in the sky fell to the ground, making the place dark. Bang bang bang. Gunshots rang out one after another. One after another, lanterns fell from the sky, causing the street that was originally visible to the naked eye to suddenly plunge into darkness. It really made people feel like they could not even see their own fingers in front of them. Under the gunshots, the sparse crowd on the street was immediately agitated. They covered their ears and ran around like headless flies, trying to relieve the fear and dread in their hearts. In contrast, the assassins who were prepared to follow them did not run around in all directions. However, the sudden darkness still stunned them and caught them off guard. When their vision turned completely dark, their habit prevented them from regaining their vision in a short period of time. The only thing they could do was to stay put and wait for their retina to recover from the situation in front of them. However, it was at this moment that Cheng Qian and the others made their move. With the help of the advanced night vision goggles, they immediately locked onto the people who were following them. Then they slowed down their breathing and exhaled slowly. After testing the direction of the wind, they focused their eyes and placed the index finger of their right hand on the trigger. Then they gently moved it, spinning bullets flew out from the barrel of the gun. While the assassins were still waiting for their vision to recover, the bronze bullets accurately drilled into their bodies. Under the powerful lethality and accurate shooting, many of the assassins did not even know what was going on. They were either shot between their eyebrows or had their hearts pierced, causing them to fall to the ground. In just 10 breaths, 7 or 8 assassins were killed by a single shot. There were also 4 or 5 who were unlucky enough to move their bodies because they heard the gunshots and were not killed by a single shot. However, most of the bullets hit their bodies as well. It was just that the bullets did not hit the critical areas. This result caused many people to scream in pain. The sound of gunshots, shouts, running, and screams were incessant, creating a chaotic scene in the alley. Madame Shui, who was in the sedan, had already woken up. She instinctively wanted to lift the curtain and run out of the sedan. However, Yang Qindong's figure appeared in her mind and she remembered what Lu Lang had told her. Remember, no matter who you are, once you encounter danger in the future, if you are outside, immediately lie down on the ground. If you are in the room, immediately find a safe place to hide. If you happen to be in the sedan, unless the guards let you go, you must not rush out. Also, try to lower your body as much as possible to reduce the chances of being hurt. Thinking of this, Madame Shui quickly squatted from her original sitting position. Then she listened to the gunshots outside and hoped that Lu Lang would appear soon. The gunshots outside were loud and abrupt in the quiet night. The soldiers of the warden's office who were patrolling nearby heard the gunshots and quickly rushed over. Some of the nearby brocade guards also drew their embroidered spring sabers and ran over. However, these people were far inferior to the members of the Cold Front who were guarding the streets of the Immortal Abode, Sky Beyond, and Yang Family's Bank when they heard the first gunshot. Battalion Commander Wu Sheng was squatting in the courtyard, practicing the basics of stabilizing his lower body. However, when he heard the first gunshot, his camouflage jacket was already in his hand. Then he heard the faint sound of gunshots. He whistled and a platoon of 30 Cold Front members quickly gathered. Chapter 254. Platoon 2 follow me. Platoon 1 be on high alert. Platoon 3 be responsible for patrolling. If you notice any dangerous people approaching, you can shoot to kill if the warning is ineffective. While he was giving the order, Wu Sheng had already rushed out of the courtyard with 30 soldiers, following the sound of the gunshots. However, no matter which group it was, no matter how fast they were, they could not be faster than the assassins that had already surrounded the street. The sudden gunshot had indeed caused them quite a bit of damage and they were even knocked dizzy. However, they did not forget what their mission was. Even with the sound of gunshots, it did not stop them from approaching the palanquin. This was also thanks to the darkness of the night. If it was during the day, they would not have the courage to approach the palanquin when they saw how tragically their companions died and how accurate the firearms were. It was because of the cover of the night that they thought their opponents were only using firearms that were not accurate and did not have much power. This was why they had the courage to approach the palanquin. With the help of the night vision goggles, Qing Qian and the others continuously shot the assassins in black on the street. 1, 2, 3, 4. Soon the street was filled with corpses. The smell of blood began to spread rapidly in the air, rushing into people's nostrils. It was so stimulating. In front of the 95 style, not a single assassin could get within 30 steps of the palanquin. They did not even have the chance to make a move before they died on the ground. Even when they died, they could not close their eyes. Without finding out the cause of their deaths, they could not close their eyes in peace. The assassins seemed to have been killed and there was no movement. However, Qing Qian did not have the slightest intention of letting down his guard. Fire a red signal flare and explain the situation to the outside. At the same time, everyone stay in place and be alert. If you notice any danger, don't hesitate. Don't be afraid of wasting bullets. A red signal flare rose up following the order. It was so dazzling and eye-catching in the dark night. Even the hidden sentries in Yangzhou village that were 15 miles away could see it clearly. Seeing that it was a red signal flare, the sentry immediately sent a signal to another sentry not far away. Soon Yang Qindong in the Yang family manor received the news. During the day he taught the students numbers in the Ming dynasty. It was also known as arithmetic. When the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 appeared, it made the 100 students feel strange and curious. In fact, such numbers had appeared before, but because there was a kind of number called Swanshu at that time, it was more convenient to write, so Arabic numbers were not popularized in our country in time. Now that it was taken out by Yang Qindong, everyone was curious as to how it could be calculated in such a way. However, when the multiplication formula was read out, everyone was shocked. It turned out that arithmetic could have such a pattern and be so simple. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Hu Yin, Xiao Yin, and the others who were listening from the side were also shocked by this method. For a moment, everyone's mood to learn was very high. At the end of the day, Yang Qindong's mouth was a little dry from all the teaching. Not long after class ended, he heard a subordinate report that a red signal flare had flashed in the capital. According to the agreement, a red signal flare meant that there was danger, but it had basically been resolved. When there were only 2 flare, it meant that there was a need for backup. When there were 3 flare, it meant that there was an emergency. But even though he knew the significance of a red signal flare, Yang Qindong was still a little nervous. He did not know who was going to attack his faction. Thinking that there was nothing wrong with being careful, he immediately gathered a platoon of cold front soldiers, brought along Tiger's main, Beta Persei, and Chiu V's first guard squad and rushed to the capital. After he left, the Yang family manor was also quickly placed under martial law. Battalion Commander Ting Shan led the remaining 2 platoons of cold front soldiers to guard it to ensure that nothing went wrong. In the capital, Qing Qian's squad of soldiers had been on high alert this entire time. Even though the corpse was not far away, no one went to investigate. This continued until Battalion Commander Wu Sheng arrived with the first batch of soldiers. After the 2 sides met up, they immediately began to inspect and deal with the scene. Fortunately, they found 2 uninjured assassins and quickly detained them for a sudden interrogation. But just as this was done, the embroidered uniform guards and the 5 cities warden's office arrived. Just as they were about to approach the scene, they received a warning from Battalion Commander Wu Sheng. Those who have come, listen up. I don't care who you are. Which yamen do you belong to? This place has already been sealed off. No one is allowed to approach. Otherwise, don't blame the bullets for not having eyes. With Wu Sheng's words and the mention of the banner of his mercenaries, the soldiers of the 5 cities warden's office naturally obediently stood their ground. On the other hand, the embroidered uniform guards who came relied on their status to shout that they were the emperor's personal guards and had the right and duty to inspect everything. As they shouted, they also tried to move closer. Bang! Bang! 2 gunshots suddenly rang out, hitting the feet of the embroidered uniform guards who were about to step forward. The dust that was kicked up instantly taught them how to behave. The originally shouting voices immediately became much softer until there was no more movement. The mercenaries had once more used their strength to show the outside world that they were not subject to any restrictions. Anyone who dared to challenge their military discipline would have to pay the price in blood. No one moved forward, but this did not mean that no one was paying attention. On the contrary, it didn't take long for the upper echelons of the embroidered uniform guards and the 5 cities' warden's office to arrive. This included Inspector Shiheng, who had returned to the capital before the end of the year, Commander Sun Pe, Commander Lu Gue, and fellow Commander Ji Guang. What's going on in front? Why was there a gunshot? As soon as Shiheng appeared, he asked arrogantly. Shiheng had been promoted to Inspector General, Commander-in-Chief and Count of Wuxia for his meritorious service, and then he had led an army of 150,000 soldiers to battle the Walla. But because he had been too careless, he had been schemed against and lost the battle. If not for Yang Qindong's timely intervention, the capital would have been lost. Logically speaking, a defeated general was a guilty general and should have been punished and imprisoned. But in the Great Ming, nothing was absolute. Meritorious officials could not receive substantial rewards, while guilty officials could rise to the heavens in a single step. This was a characteristic of the time. In the Great Ming, a person's meritorious service was not determined by how capable they were. In the end, it depended on whether they obeyed the emperor and obeyed imperial authority. Shiheng originally had the merit of being the emperor. This time, after he came back, he spent a lot of money and even bribed Jining. In addition, when he saw Zhu Qiu the Dai Zong, he was in pain with snot and tears. He said that he was loyal to the emperor and would listen to the emperor's orders. He was willing to do anything for the emperor. After a few maneuvers, Zhu Qiu was truly moved. Not only was he not punished, but he was also reinstated to the position of military governor. He was even given the important task of rebuilding the army with Jining. He was promoted from his original position of Count Wuxia to Marquis Wuxia. Zhu Qiu's intentions were extremely clear. He wanted to promote Shiheng and restrict Yang Qindong's influence in the army. Regaining the emperor's trust and wielding great power made Shiheng feel like he didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. As soon as he arrived, he began to speak as if he were the master of this place. In response to Shiheng's behavior, the subordinates all lowered their heads in silence. These people had been in the capital for a long time, and many of them had even witnessed the battle between the mercenaries and the Walla. Naturally, they knew how powerful these people were. It was precisely because they knew that they didn't have the courage to provoke them. Seeing that no one answered his question, Shiheng's expression turned ugly. What's the matter? No one answered, right? Very well, after this matter is over, you don't have to work anymore. You'll all be dismissed. Is Sun Tong's command department here? Go and see what's going on. Sun Tong, who was called out, had a bitter expression. He had already known from the soldiers that this was a mercenary army doing something. He had a very clear impression of these people, and of course, he knew that they were not to be trifled with. Therefore, when he heard Shiheng call out his name, he carefully moved closer to him and muttered, "Sir Inspector, this is a mercenary army doing something. It's not good for us to interfere too much." What mercenary army doing? It's not good for us to interfere too much. Isn't this the capital of the Great Ming Dynasty? Since you're so cowardly, I think you don't have to work anymore. Forget it, I'll go take a look myself. Men, clear the way. If anyone dares to block my way, arrest them as well, Shiheng said nonchalantly, treating Sun Tong's good intentions as nothing more than ill intent. After Shiheng gave the order, the soldiers he brought opened the path and walked toward the center of the battlefield with great fanfare. Not far away, Lv Gue and Ji Guang saw all this, but neither of them had any intention of reminding them. Since someone wanted to clear the path, they could just let him do it. It was also a good opportunity to see if these mercenaries really dared to provoke anyone and not give face to anyone. Shiheng, who didn't know what others were thinking and had only heard of the mercenary army's name, walked toward the center of the battlefield under the gazes of the crowd and the lanterns held by several of his trusted aides. On the dark street, several lanterns slowly walked over. This scene was particularly eye-catching, and naturally attracted the attention of Battalion Commander Wuxia. "Who are you? Stop. If you continue to walk forward, we won't be polite. This official is the Great Ming Dynasty's inspector, and I have the authority to command the military camp in the capital. Who are you? Why are you making such a big commotion in the middle of the night?" Shiheng walked forward under the protection of his soldiers and questioned loudly. Based on his experience, it was very easy to intimidate others with this kind of momentum and make the opponent feel afraid. Chapter 255. They approached with a menacing aura, giving off the impression that a large army was approaching. If it was a normal Ming soldier, he might feel afraid and guilty. However, in front of the most elite cold front, there was a limit to what he could do. The first thing to do after entering the cold front was to train one's courage. If one did not have enough courage and was timid, they would never be able to enter this elite new army. Hence, Shi Heng's self-righteous yelling did not have any effect. On the contrary, Wuxia casually took out his pistol and pointed it at Shi Heng's direction. He said, "I don't care who you are. Before the Duke of Loyalty arrives, no one is allowed to come close. Please stop." When Shi Heng heard someone mention the name of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, his face was filled with dissatisfaction. Ever since he returned to the capital, he had heard of the Duke of Loyalty the most. There were even many people who compared him to Yang Qindong, which made the commander, who had a lot of experience in the army, displeased him. No matter what, Shi Heng was a veteran who had experienced hundreds of battles, right? He also had many years of experience patrolling the borders and had fought many wars with the foreign races. It was not an exaggeration to say that he had climbed out of a pile of corpses. However, someone actually compared him to a young man who had just turned 20 years old. How could he accept this? When he heard the Duke of Loyalty's name, he was even more indignant. "Oh, I insist on coming over. What can you do about it? Come on, archers, get ready. If these people dare to resist, shoot them for the crime of rebellion." Before he could finish his sentence, a loud gunshot interrupted him. Then the lantern on Shi Heng's left was shot to the ground. The gunshot first flashed, then it turned into darkness. The sudden change in the lantern gave Shi Heng a fright. He instinctively leaned towards the lantern on the right. Just as he was about to lean over, there was another loud gunshot, and the other lantern was extinguished. The two consecutive gunshots were a warning. This was a warning from Wuxia to Shi Heng. It could also be seen as a warning from the mercenaries to the great Ming army. Two gunshots rang out, and the effect could be said to be very good. At least the scene was quiet, and it seemed that they were really frightened. After a few seconds, Shi Heng suddenly shouted, "Come, these mercenaries are going to kill the imperial court officials. All archers get ready." As soon as he shouted, the soldiers of the warden's office of the 5 cities took out the bows and arrows on their backs and prepared to draw their bows and arrows. Although it was still dark, there was a feeling of mutual hostility. Any veteran with some sense of battlefield could feel a kind of suffocating pressure. Under the invisible pressure, some soldiers began to tremble. This was a human's instinctive reaction when faced with fatal danger. Compared to the reaction of some of the great Ming soldiers, Qing Qian also became a little nervous. However, he was more worried about the safety of the third madam than himself. In the eyes of Qing Qian and the other mercenaries, their lives were already the 6th young masters. Their deaths were not regrettable. After all, the first lesson on the first day of joining the mercenaries was to face death and not be afraid of death. However, the third madam was different. If something happened to her, even if they all died, it would be difficult for them to truly close their eyes and die in peace. Under the night vision goggles, he saw that there were at least 300 great Ming soldiers with bows and arrows. He imagined that when these arrows came from a distance, he and the other mercenaries would not be able to survive. Then, no one would be able to protect the third madam. For the first time, Wuxia lowered his head and said, "The third madam of the Loyal Guild is in the sedan. If she is hurt, have you thought about what the Loyal Guild will do?" Cheng Qian's voice was very loud and seemed to be clearer in the darkness. When it reached the Ming army, the expressions of LV Gui Ji Guang, Sun Tong, and the others changed drastically. They had all dealt with Yang Qindong and even tried his methods. Although this duke was young, his methods were really terrifying. If they really pushed him to the edge, they were afraid that no one present would be able to get away with it. No one would have a good ending. Among the crowd, Sun Tong's reaction was the fastest. In fact, he had received the most kindness from Yang Qindong. "Admiral, the third madam of the Loyal Guild is also here. It's better not to shoot arrows casually. Once innocent people are hurt, the consequences will be serious." "What consequences will there be?" Shi Heng, who had already shot the arrow on the bow, responded coldly. "Even if the third madam of the Loyal Guild is here, she will be sacrificing herself for the country. I think the Loyal Guild will understand." Shi Heng's meaning was very simple. He wanted to use the excuse of disturbing the Ming army to deal with the mercenaries and destroy their prestige. As for the so-called third madam of the Loyal Guild, they could only blame it on their bad luck. He really wanted to see what the young Yang Qindong would do after such a thing happened. Could it be that he really dared to do anything to him, the great Ming dynasty's admiral? This duke doesn't understand. As soon as Shi Heng's voice fell, another loud voice sounded. Then, countless lights suddenly shot from afar and shone directly on the bodies of the great Ming dynasty soldiers. Shi Heng, who was hiding among them, had nowhere to hide. At this critical moment, Yang Qindong finally arrived. As soon as he arrived, he heard Shi Heng's words and immediately replied angrily. Along with this voice, 10 members of the 1st Guard Squad and 30 members of the Lung Feng Squad took out their military flashlights and shone them forward. The military flashlights in the large warehouse were piled up. Yang Qindong had entered and exited the warehouse several times and equipped everyone with this kind of advanced treasure. Now that the light flashed, the electric light that could clearly illuminate 100 meters away caused all the Ming army and the embroidered uniform guards to fall into a place where they had nowhere to hide. Under the strong light, Shi Heng couldn't help but squint his eyes. He was even more shocked. He couldn't understand what kind of advanced weapon this was. How could it illuminate the night as if it was daytime? Most importantly, in such an environment, his body was exposed to the advanced firearms of the mercenaries. Didn't this mean that if they wanted to shoot him to death, they could easily find him and execute him? At this moment, Shi Heng had an extremely bad feeling in his heart. Shi Heng didn't know that even without the strong light, he was still in the sights of the Lung Feng Squad. However, Yang Qindong still chose to do this as a serious warning. As soon as the strong light appeared, the first to panic were the great Ming soldiers who were holding strong bows. They thought that they could luckily shoot arrows in the dark. But now they were clearly seen by others. How would they dare to move? This caused all the Ming army to become very obedient when Yang Qindong appeared. Taking advantage of this pressure, Yang Qindong strode forward and arrived at the juncture between the two armies. His cold gaze swept over the people who had just arrived. Suddenly he roared, "Are you crazy? Don't you know that these are mercenaries?" Yang Qindong's question made many Ming soldiers lower their heads. They couldn't answer this question. Even Lu Guiji Guang, Sun Tong and the others lowered their heads. They didn't want to answer this question. Or rather, they didn't want to face the Duke of Loyalty and Yang Qindong. Shi Heng naturally felt everyone's emotions. However, at this moment he absolutely couldn't lower his head. It was not because of anything else, but because he was the one who shouted the most fiercely just now. If he was the first to admit defeat when Yang Qindong appeared, how could he lead the troops? So after about 10 seconds, Shi Heng finally raised his head after he had more or less adapted to the strong light. So what if they are mercenaries? In the territory of our great Ming dynasty, anyone who casually kills people will be punished no matter who they are. You're Shi Heng? Seeing that someone actually answered his question, Lung Feng Squad's eyes lit up. Yang Qindong's eyes narrowed as he stared coldly at Lung Feng. I am Marquis. Shi Heng, who didn't want to weaken his momentum, tried to straighten his body as much as possible as he answered. Don't call yourself Marquis in front of this Duke. When I was a Marquis you were just a small count. As soon as Shi Heng finished speaking, Yang Qindong's angry voice spread through the entire street. The questioning voice was like thunder, and Shi Heng was naturally furious. However, at this moment he didn't know how to answer. After all, he was indeed 10% worse than Yang Qindong in terms of title. At this moment he actually began to hate the acting emperor Zhu Qiu. He hated that Zhu Qiu didn't directly promote him from Count Wuqing to Duke Wuqing. That way he could confidently talk to Yang Qindong. However, he didn't think about it. Yang Qindong was promoted to Duke because Zhu Qiu had no choice. He really didn't know how to reward Yang Qindong, so he had to do something. And what did he do? What contribution did he make? Shi Heng still had an unconvinced expression on his face. When he was still sulking, Yang Qindong spoke again. Just now you said that, so what if they are mercenaries? Then let me ask you, if there were no mercenaries, who would resist the Walla's army? Without the mercenaries, the capital would have already been taken over by someone else, so what right did you have to stand here and make such a fuss? You look down on the mercenaries, but what have you done? Have you lost every battle? Under the angry questioning, Shi Heng only felt his face burning. He wanted to refute something, but he found that it seemed that he was powerless to say anything. Yang Qindong, after angrily scolding Shi Heng until he couldn't say a word, seemed to be still angry. He followed the strong light and looked at Lv Guiji Guang, Sun Tong and the great Ming soldiers. He asked, Shi Heng is a defeated general. During the battle to protect the capital, he didn't know where he escaped to. It's normal that he isn't familiar with the situation. But what about you? You all experienced that battle, so how could you not know the power of the mercenaries? Have you thought about it? If they were injured because of this, once the leader of the mercenaries asks, how would I answer? If we don't respond well, the mercenaries will become enemies with the great Ming. Who can stop them? Chapter 256. And you genie guards, don't you like to join in the fun? Do you like to watch the fun? You clearly know that this Duke's third madam is here, but you didn't say anything. Do you want the previous incident to happen again? In anger, Yang Qindong said threatening words. As for the previous incident, It was naturally referring to the eunuch who claimed to be his duke and clashed with Yang Qindong's title of duke. Later, when the reminder was to no avail, more than 10 eunuchs and stewards were threatened in one night and almost lost their lives. After that incident, no eunuch called himself master anymore. Even if they had to call him master, they had to call themselves master. Now Yang Qindong mentioned this incident. It was obvious that he intended to admit that he arranged for someone to do that. But with such an admission, LV Gue did not dare to question him. On the contrary, he hurriedly lowered his head. He, who had experienced Yang Qindong's power more than once, naturally knew the serious consequences of angering him. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, he first reprimanded Shi Heng. Then LV Gue Ji Guang and Sun Tong did not run away. Even the soldiers of the great Ming dynasty lowered their heads in shame. With such momentum, there was no need to continue the war. The winner had already been decided. Under the angry reprimand, no one dared to confront him. Yang Qindong seemed to be less angry. He turned around and walked to the side of the soft sedan. As soon as he opened the curtain, Madame Snow, who was wearing a brocade robe, plunged into Yang Qindong's arms and shouted, "Lu Lang, I'm scared. I almost couldn't see you again." "Don't be afraid. With Lu Lang here, no one will dare to bully you." Yang Qindong reached out and patted Madame Snow's back. He looked at Qing Qian and said, "Tell me what's going on?" "Master, it's like this." In order not to expose his relationship with Yang Qindong in front of outsiders, Qing Qian did not call him the sixth young master directly. Instead, he called him master. "Tonight, we'll send third madam back to Yang Manor." From Qing Qian's mouth, he recounted everything that happened that night from beginning to end. From these words, everyone finally understood what had happened and why the mercenaries had opened fire in the city. At the end of his speech, Qing Qian pointed to the ground and said, "Duke, all the bodies of the killers are here. There are still 2 survivors. They just confessed that they are the subordinates of Lu San, a scoundrel in the city. They were ordered by their boss to cause trouble for third madam." "Lu San?" Yang Qindong repeated the name, his eyes filled with murderous intent. He then turned his head abruptly and looked at Lu Gue, Sun Tong and the others, saying, "Everyone should have heard very clearly what's going on. Next, will you be the one to capture this person or will I be the one to do it?" "We'll do it." "Capturing criminals is one of the responsibilities of the embroidered uniform guards," Lu Gue quickly said. Lu Gue hurriedly interjected. He didn't dare to leave the task of capturing people in the city to the mercenaries. If they really were to do it, the gunshots on the streets would inevitably injure the innocent. When the time came, the capital would fall into chaos, and he wouldn't be able to bear the responsibility for the crime. "Yes, we'll do it. The warden's office of the 5 cities will fully cooperate with the embroidered uniform guards." Sun Tong also quickly expressed his position. Shi Heng, on the other hand, had been standing to the side. It was as if he had become an outsider as he watched Yang Qindong give orders. "Well, I'll leave it to you. If you can't catch Lu San or catch a dead person, I'm afraid you'll have to report that the mercenaries were almost killed. At that time, if anything happens, you'll have to deal with it yourself." After explaining the seriousness of the matter, Yang Qindong turned and left, carrying Madame Shui, under the protection of the others. Yang Qindong left, but the matter was far from over. The embroidered uniform guards and the warden's office of the 5 cities immediately took action. For someone like Lu San, who had a criminal record, it was not difficult to find him. An hour later, Lu San, who was waiting for news in the red light district, was caught. Yang Qindong personally sent Madame Shui to his luxurious carriage and rushed back to the Yang village with a large group of people. Hu Yan and Xiao Yin had been waiting in the village for a long time. When they saw that Madame Shui was safe and sound, they breathed a sigh of relief. "Young master." In the courtyard of the inner courtyard, Yang San had already knelt on the ground. The security bureau had not noticed Lu San's sudden action at all, which was a dereliction of duty. Fortunately, Madame Shui was fine. Otherwise, Yang San really did not know how to face the young master. Yang Qindong, wearing a cotton cloak, came to the courtyard and stood in front of Yang San with a cold and stern face. Yang San was obviously angry, which made him feel even more at a loss and lower his head. Tiger's Mane and Beta Persei stood on either side of Yang Qindong. They wanted to say something for Yang San, but before they understood the young master's meaning, they did not speak. The tense and depressing atmosphere lasted for a while. When Yang San could not help trembling because of the pressure, Yang Qindong finally said, "Try to control as many forces as possible. This kind of thing will not be allowed to happen again. As for how much money you need, just write a report." Yang Qindong's voice contained no emotion. Madame Shui had almost had an accident. It was impossible to say that he was not worried, but it was also impossible to blame the security bureau. After all, the capital was too big and there were too many people. How could they be aware of everything? The only thing they could do now was to constantly increase the strength of the guards and strengthen the strength of the security bureau. With enough money they should be able to take some precautions. Yang San had been kneeling on the ground. It was not until Yang Qindong left that he slowly stood up. Tiger's Mane, who stayed on the side, stepped forward and comforted the subordinate. Don't blame the young master for being angry. Madame Shui almost had an accident this time. Anyone would not be able to bear it. I know. The young master has been very kind. Yang San nodded heavily. Of course he did not blame the young master. He had thought that after such an incident he would not be able to keep his position and might even be kicked out of the family. However, the young master still gave him a chance. As the saying went, a gentleman would die for his bosom friend. Even though Yang San's life had long been the young master's, this belief became even more firm. Not to mention how angry Yang Qindong was in the young manner. After Lu San was captured in the capital, he did not even last a night. Under the various methods of the brocade guards, he confessed everything. He directly said that Yu Xiong had spent 50,000 taels of silver to hire him to make trouble for the Duke of Loyalty. Yu Xiong was the mastermind behind the scenes. Once the result was out, someone sent the news to the palace, someone sent the news to the Yang Manor, and someone sent the news to the Yu Manor. Imperial City, Imperial Palace. Last night's incident had already been reported to the Emperor. The acting Emperor Zhu Qiu had already learned the whole story from Jining and Shi Heng. Zhu Qiu did not comment on the fact that Yu Xiong wanted to make trouble for Yang Qindong. There were always some people in the world who were incomparably daring. Even he couldn't help but want to curse them for seeking death. But on the other hand, the fact that the mercenaries had killed people in the city truly displeased him. This was the capital of the great Ming dynasty, at the foot of the imperial city. The mercenaries had brazenly killed people on the streets. When had they ever cared about what other people thought? Who had given them the authority to enforce the law? But Zhu Qiu had no choice but to suppress his anger. After all, he had long ago known of the strength of the mercenaries. Walla had not been a match for them, so how could he be a match for them now? He was the emperor, the sovereign of the 9 and 5, but in his own territory, there were things that he could not interfere in. He felt incredibly vexed. Sirs, tell me what you think. Zhu Qiu's voice was cold, indicating that he was not in a good mood. In fact, he was in a terrible mood. Shi Heng and Jining looked at each other. Then, the military commander plopped to the ground and said, Your Majesty, it is said that the fist is the absolute truth. For the mercenaries to dare to do this, they are clearly looking down on imperial authority. This subject believes that if we want to put an end to this, we must first strengthen ourselves. This subject requests that Your Majesty increase the amount of silver and increase the speed of recruiting soldiers. At the same time, we must equip 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion. Once we have enough strength, no one will dare to challenge imperial authority or Your Majesty. I second the motion. Jining also knelt on the ground and voiced her support for Jining. As Zhu Qiu's most trusted subjects, the two of them were well aware of their positions. Only when the emperor's authority was strong enough would their authority be secure. Just as they had said earlier, if the army could be completed sooner, with 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion, they would have the strength to fight against the mercenaries. When the time came, if they really wanted to attack, once the cannons were fired, the entire place would be razed to the ground. At that time, who would dare to look down on them and the emperor? That's right, my dear subject, you are right. The fist is the absolute truth. How about this? I will immediately increase the amount by 2 million taels of silver to expand the army. Zhu Qiu nodded repeatedly, looking as if he had been persuaded by Shi Heng's words. Hearing that it was only 2 million taels of silver, Shi Heng was a little unwilling. This amount of silver was enough to build a normal army, but this time they were building 3 firearm battalions and 1 artillery battalion. That was definitely an act of burning silver. 2 million taels was really not enough. Just as Shi Heng was about to raise his head and say something, he heard Jin Ying's quiet reminder. Lord Shi, don't go too far. Some things need to be discussed at length. As one of Zhu Qiu's personal attendants, Jining naturally had a deep understanding of this emperor. This emperor was an ambitious person. His courage was no less than Zhu Qiu's. His mind was flexible and he was open-minded. He treated his subjects well. But there was one thing that was a little too stingy. Chapter 257. Of course, this also had a lot to do with the fact that the national treasury had only recently been paying out and not coming in. This time, taking out 2 million at once was already the limit. If Shiheng made another request, not only would he not increase it, but it was also uncertain if the 2 million would even arrive. Shiheng, who was about to say that the silver was too little, immediately shut his mouth when he heard Jin Ying's suggestion. He kowtowed to the ground and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty. This subject will immediately go and build a new army. I believe that it won't be long before the great Ming's army returns to its former glory." Very good. Hearing Shiheng's promise, Zhu Qiu's face finally revealed a trace of a smile. As long as he had a strong army, he wouldn't have to rely on or fear anyone. He could defeat Yingzong and unify the great Ming. He wouldn't have to worry about the expressions of the mercenaries. Just as Zhu Qiu's face was filled with yearning, the eunuch on duty outside the door walked in and said in a sharp voice, "Reporting to Your Majesty, Minister Yu of the Ministry of Justice requests an audience." "Yushiriwa? What is he doing here?" Hearing this, Zhu Qiu, who still didn't understand what was going on, was at a loss. However, the head eunuch, Jining, had already whispered, "Your Majesty, that Yu Xiong is Minister Yu's grandson." "Oh right. Zhu Qiu nodded. Then he looked at Jining and Shiheng and said, "My two beloved subjects, what do you say about whether we want to see him or not?" The two important subjects looked at each other and shook their heads. In the end, it was Jining who took the initiative to say, "Your Majesty, Yu Xiong is extremely daring. He wants to harm the Duke of Loyalty and Courage. Since this is the case, I'm afraid we won't be able to protect him." That's right. Shiheng nodded heavily in agreement. Obviously, what happened last night had left a deep impression on Shiheng. After witnessing the power of advanced firearms, the shadow of death had been shrouding him. If it was not possible, he absolutely did not want to offend this loyal duke, because he did not know what the other party would do in anger. If the other party really wanted to kill him, even if he went back to the emperor to make the decision for him, what meaning and use would it be if the dead could not be brought back to life? Jining and Shiheng had the same idea. Zhu Qiu nodded and made her decision. He naturally knew what Yushiriwa meant by coming here at this time. However, he had to pay the price for doing something wrong. What's more, he had offended Yang Qindong. He deserved it. Even with his identity as the emperor, he couldn't say anything. Since he couldn't make the decision for him, it was better not to meet him, so as to avoid hurting the relationship between the ruler and his subjects. Pass down the message. Say that Zhen is not feeling well. If there is anything, say it at the morning court tomorrow. Zhu Qiu waved his hand at the young eunuch who came to report. He made the decision to not meet him. The young eunuch left. Yushiriwa, who was waiting outside the palace, heard the emperor's words and sighed deeply. Then he shook his head and slowly turned to leave. His grandson was extremely daring. He had actually taken the initiative to find trouble with the loyal duke. After learning of the matter, Yushiriwa knew that things were not good. His first reaction was to see the emperor and plead for leniency. He thought that no matter what, he was an old official and an important official. The emperor should give him some face. As long as the emperor was willing to mediate, the loyal duke would have to give him some face. However, the emperor did not want to see him. This had already made his attitude clear. Now it seemed that he could only beg the loyal duke himself. However, when he thought about how the other party was still a child who had just grown up, if the news of his status asking to see the other party spread, how would he have any face in the future? Forget it. It's just a crime of instigating. There is no conclusive evidence and no serious consequences. Based on my position as the Minister of Justice, without conclusive evidence, it won't be so easy to touch Xiong. Minister Yu comforted himself like this and left the palace. He was prepared to use his power to wrestle with the loyal duke. Yushiriwa was a person who had studied since childhood. He had a photographic memory and could recite with a glance. In the 13th year of Yongle 1415, he became a grand scholar and served as an imperial censor. After Zhu Qiu ascended the throne, he was promoted to the position of Minister of Justice. He could be considered to be extraordinarily capable. Moreover, when he was young, he was also upright and honest. However, now that he was old, his temperament had changed a lot. In order to achieve his goal, he had also done some things that inverted right and wrong. His personality was hypocritical and polite, and he was no longer as hard-hearted and impartial as when he was young. This time, the matter involved his own grandson. Although he had more than one grandson, how could he casually abandon his own family? As such, he left the palace and headed straight for the Ministry of Justice. The power of a Minister of Justice was not something that others could imagine. Yu Xiong's case involved criminal matters. Naturally, It was not a problem to take him away from the embroidered uniform guard and transfer him to the Ministry of Justice. The embroidered uniform guards were having a headache. Yu Xiong had already been caught. He had been dragged out of his bed early in the morning. Now that he had been caught, how to deal with him and how to interrogate him had become a headache. On one hand it was the loyal Duke who was the victim. On the other hand it was the old Minister of Justice. It seemed that no matter what they did, it would be easy to offend them. It was at this moment that a document from the Ministry of Justice arrived, requesting that the suspect, Yu Xiong, be sent to the Ministry of Justice for interrogation. Since someone wanted a hot potato, how could the embroidered uniform guard be polite? They immediately sent Yu Xiong out and had some peace and quiet. The Ministry of Justice took over and the news was quickly sent to Yang Qindong. At this moment, the sixth young master was teaching students in the Yang Family Academy and imparting his new knowledge. Today Yang Qindong was talking about the effects of gravity. He was teaching everyone that everything could be explained scientifically. Just as the lecture was in full swing and everyone was listening with great interest, Tiger's Mane came and whispered something in Yang Qindong's ear. Got it? Yang Qindong nodded and a faint smile appeared on his face. Then he turned to the 101 students and said, "Today's lesson will end here. Everyone go back and review. If there's anything you don't understand you can ask me tomorrow. Let's study by ourselves." Under the respectful gazes of all the students, Yang Qindong left the academy. Outside the door, the head of the security bureau Yang San was already waiting. What happened? Yang Qindong took a wet towel and wiped his hands as he asked Yang San. Young master Yu Xiong was arrested early in the morning. Yu Shuiwei went to the palace but the emperor did not see him. However, after returning to the Ministry of Justice, he ordered people to take his grandson from the embroidered uniform guard to the Ministry of Justice and protect him. Because the people protecting him are all his trusted subordinates, they don't know what happened. However, it can be seen that they have no intention of compromising and are still holding on to hope. Yang San explained everything he knew to Yang Qindong and then stood respectfully to the side. His job was only to tell the truth. As for the specific decisions, it was up to the young master to make the decision. Oh, haha, this minister you wants to compete with this young master. Yang Qindong was not surprised at all. On the contrary, he chuckled. However, the smile quickly disappeared. Did you find the person I asked you to find? The so-called, looking for someone, referred to how Yu Xiong had forced her husband to write a letter of separation in order to protect himself in a foreign land in order to get a woman. A few days ago when Yang Qindong met with Yu Xiong, he arranged for the security bureau to search for Yu Xiong. There should be news by now. We found him. According to the young master's orders, he is coming to the capital under the protection of the security bureau. He will probably arrive tomorrow night. Yang San said with his chest puffed out. It was already a dereliction of duty that they did not receive any news of the attack on the third madam. Now they could not allow any more mistakes. Not bad. Hearing that the person would arrive tomorrow night, Yang Qindong's face regained its confidence. Inform Assistant Minister Su that this young master wants to see him. The so-called Assistant Minister Su was naturally the right Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Su Yozhen. This person had publicly impeached Yang Qindong, but in reality he was the first person to side with him. It was time for him to come in handy. Su Yozhen was one of the most powerful officials in history. Unfortunately, in his later years he became an official who was punished. Because of Yang Qindong's appearance, his life was completely changed. At the very beginning, Su Yozhen was merely an imperial censor. When she was a mere 7th grade official, she wasn't valued at all. It was Yang San who suddenly found him and gave him a large sum of money. While improving his life, Yang San also asked him to do some things within his power. After that, his career was smooth sailing. He rose all the way up to the position of a 6th-rank official, then a 4th-rank official of the Taichang Temple, and now a 3rd-rank official of the Ministry of Personnel. It could be said that he was rising up the ranks at an astonishing speed. And all of this was inseparable from Yang Qindong's support and operations. Gradually, Su Yozhen gave birth to an idea. That was, relying on this Duke of Loyalty seemed to be a good thing. At the very least she could do a few things for him. Not only did she receive an official position, she also received money, and she even had a reputation. Where else could she find such a perfect thing? This was how people were. After receiving benefits, their attitude and understanding of a person would undergo a qualitative change. Was this not the case? When Yang San informed Su Yozhen through the spies of the Security Bureau that the Duke of Loyalty had invited her, he quickly disguised himself and left the capital, arriving at the Yang family manor. Su Yozhen's appearance was extremely secretive. On the way, there were people from the Bureau of Security following him to ensure that he was not followed. Not long after, a carriage stopped in the backyard of the Yang Manor. Su Yozhen, dressed in a black robe and a bamboo hat, stepped out of the carriage. Chapter 258. In a study in the backyard, Yang Qindong sat upright and looked straight ahead, waiting for Su Yozhen to be brought here. As soon as he looked up, he saw the Duke of Loyalty, who was only 20 years old. He didn't know why, but there was a sense of respect in his bones. He immediately clasped his fist and said, "Su Yozhen has seen Duke Yang. Ah, Lord Su is not an outsider. Please take a seat." Yang Qindong smiled and pointed at the chair in front of him. He released a wave of pressure with every movement. When it reached Su Yozhen, he obediently sat down on the chair. Looking at this assistant minister in his early 40s, Yang Qindong could even see a trace of ambition and desire for power and money in his eyes. He wasn't afraid of other people's thoughts. He was only afraid that they didn't know what he was thinking. Only when he knew the other party's goal would he be able to cater to the other party's desires and use his abilities to help the other party rise. "Lord Su, our time is limited. I've come to ask you something. You should have heard about Yu Xiong's matter, right? What are your thoughts?" Yang Qindong went straight to the point. In his opinion, talking about feelings with Su Yozhen was purely superfluous. If you couldn't give enough benefits to such a person, he was afraid that even if you said more words to win her over, she wouldn't acknowledge you after you left the house. It was even possible that she would sell you. When Su Yozhen heard Yang Qindong's straightforwardness, she was stunned at first, but she soon recovered her natural state. On the way here, Su Yozhen had seriously considered the reason why Yang Qindong wanted to see him. In the end, he concluded that it was because of Yu Xiong. How could it be so easy to wrestle with the current Minister of Justice? Although he had been promoted very quickly and was now the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel, his foundation was still too shallow. If he didn't make any great contributions, he would probably stay in this position for 10 or 20 years, or even his entire life. It was precisely because she knew her own situation that Su Yozhen hoped to have an opportunity to perform, and the matter between Yang Qindong and Yu Shiyue was undoubtedly an opportunity. As long as she performed well, it was possible to gain a lot of benefits from it. Therefore, when Yang Qindong asked the question, Su Yozhen only hesitated for a moment before bluntly saying, "Yu Xiong is extremely daring. He actually dares to have crooked thoughts about the current duke. He should be killed as a warning to others." "Not bad." Yang Qindong smiled warmly, seemingly very satisfied with Su Yozhen's answer. "But I don't know if Lord Su has any ideas? You must know that Yu Shiyue was able to replace the Minister of Revenue, Jin Lian, as the Minister of Justice because he has the trust of the Daizong Emperor. Without sufficient reason, it is impossible to take away his position. After Daizong Emperor took the position, there were naturally many changes in the way people worked. There were people who were disappointed and people who were favored. Yu Shiyue was one of the people who benefited. It was impossible for him to not have the Daizong Emperor's trust. This was also the biggest obstacle for Yang Qindong to take action against him. Yes, Duke Yang is right. This Minister Yu is quite capable. It won't be easy to take action against him. Su Yozhen agreed with this view. In his heart, he even felt that Yang Qindong going against Yu Shiyue wasn't a wise move. Of course, not being optimistic didn't mean that he would oppose it. Again, Su Yozhen's ambition wasn't small. He wasn't satisfied with the current situation. What he needed was an opportunity. If the world was peaceful, there wouldn't be any opportunities. Only in troubled times would he be able to fish in troubled waters. Although he said it wouldn't be easy, he directly said that he wanted to take action against Yu Shiyue. It could be seen that Su Yozhen had already made up his mind. Yang Qindong, who saw all of this, immediately understood the other's thoughts. He chuckled and said, "It may not be easy to take action against him, but if you disgust him and shake his authority, it is possible for Lord Su to take half a step forward." When he heard that he could take half a step forward, Su Yozhen's eyes immediately lit up. His voice trembled as he said, "What is Duke Yang's opinion?" "It can't be called an opinion. It's nothing more than the truth," Yang Qindong said with a smile and pushed a stack of papers in front of Su Yozhen. "Lord Su can take a look. These are all evidence of Yu Shiyue's corruption and perversion of the law." The thick stack of papers recorded all the mistakes Fu Shiyue had made when he was an official. The earliest one was recorded 10 years ago. Looking at this, Su Yozhen's forehead couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Who was this Duke of Loyalty and Courage? How could he find out so many things? Yu Xiong's matter had only just happened, but he had already made sufficient preparations. It was obvious that this wasn't done in a day. It was very likely that this was prepared long ago. In other words, this Duke of Loyalty should have some understanding of each of the ministers, and should have investigated the past of all of them. Didn't that mean that some of his weaknesses were in this person's hands? At this moment, Su Yozhen suddenly felt a sense of fear towards Yang Qindong. His current achievements were all due to this person. If one day he offended him, he was afraid that he would lose everything at any time. These papers allowed Su Yozhen to see how terrifying Yang Qindong was. When he spoke, he was naturally a lot more cautious. Yes, Duke Yang. With these things, it is enough to make you Shangshu uncomfortable. But still, he was promoted not long ago and has the trust of Emperor Daizong. If you want to take action against him, I'm afraid. Without waiting for Su Yozhen to finish, Yang Qindong said, "Isn't Lord Su also deeply trusted by the Emperor? Furthermore, we are only trying to sway him, not take him down. If we do well, I believe that Lord Su will have no problem becoming the left assistant minister from the Ministry of Personnel to the Ministry of Justice." Su Yozhen sucked in a breath of cold air when he heard this, and his expression became much more nervous. Right now, he was the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel. Even though his official position was the same as the left assistant minister He Wenyuan, he was still half a step behind. For example, if the current Minister of Personnel, Wang Ji, stepped down, logically speaking, He Wenyuan would take over his position and not Su Yozhen. This was the direct difference between the right assistant minister and the right assistant minister. In other words, even though the position of the left assistant minister was still a rank 3 official, in reality, he had the possibility of taking a step forward and becoming a minister. It was no wonder that he was so excited when he heard this. Is this possible? Su Yozhen asked with a trace of uncertainty. However, his eyes were fixed on Yang Qindong, as though he was afraid that he would say the word impossible. Why is it impossible? With a smile on his face, Yang Qindong took out a piece of paper and handed it to Su Yozhen. These are some of the things that the current left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice has done. It shouldn't be difficult to take him down based on this. As for whether Lord Su will be able to get what you want, that will depend on your own methods. You should know that if I were to step in, it would only produce the opposite effect. Of course, I will not do nothing. Here are 1,000,000 taels of silver notes. You can exchange them at the Yang family's bank anytime. This can be considered as a congratulatory gift for Lord Su's promotion to the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. A stack of silver notes was pushed in front of Su Yozhen just like that, along with 2 thick pieces of evidence. For Su Yozhen to be able to become a powerful official in history, his abilities were not to be doubted. As long as someone like him was given a chance to display his abilities, he would definitely soar to the top. With money and evidence, Su Yozhen's heart thumped. At this moment he seemed to be able to see his future as an official. With a red face and a racing heart, he reached out and put away the items one by one. Then he cupped his hands and said to Yang Qindong, "Duke Yang Yozhen thanks you for your help. In the future your needs will be my needs." "Ah, Lord Su, there's no need to be so polite. We're already on the same boat. As long as I'm fine, I can guarantee Lord Su's safety and prosperity." Laughing heartily, Yang Qindong pulled Su Yozhen onto his boat. He believed that with the evidence of the 2 officials, Su Yozhen wouldn't have the courage to fall out with Yang Qindong. If he really did that, he didn't know if anything would happen to the Duke of Loyalty, but he would definitely be dead. Su Yozhen left. When he left, his steps were much bolder than when he came. Seeing that the guest had left, Tiger's Mane walked up and asked with a cautious tone, "Young master, isn't it too much to give him 1,000,000 taels?" "Not much. In the future, his usefulness will be far greater than this number," Yang Qindong said with confidence. With so many properties, the thing he didn't lack the least was money. As long as a problem could be solved with money, it naturally wouldn't be a problem. Ministry of Justice Yamen. Yu Xiong was brought here and quickly received different treatment. It wasn't like when he was locked in the brocade guard's cold iron window. Instead, he was in a clean and tidy single room, and there was food and drink available. What kind of joke was this? The grandson of his immediate superior was locked up here, so he should enjoy special treatment. Not to mention, until now the case hadn't been determined. As soon as Yu Xiong appeared here, he was no longer in the sorry state he was in when he was caught by the brocade guard in the morning. Instead, he ate lavishly and threw all his worries to the back of his mind. His grandfather wouldn't leave him alone. After knowing this, he could rest assured. Lu San, who was caught together with him, received inhuman treatment in the prison of Ministry of Justice. He had basically been tortured by all kinds of torture. A layer of his skin had been peeled off, so he changed his statement and took the responsibility of dealing with Madame Snow alone. After Lu San changed his statement, Yu Xiong basically had nothing to do. He just needed to wait for the case to be settled, and then he could go home openly and continue to be a tyrant. Chapter 259. Yu Shiyue had changed his usual position and was now the head of the Ministry of Justice. His intention to protect his grandson was very obvious. The reason he did this was not only because he loved his grandson, but more importantly, he had heard some news from the palace. It was said that someone did not like the Duke of Loyalty and wanted to teach him a lesson. It was this news that gave Yu Shiyue confidence. He also wanted to take the opportunity to show off in front of that person that he was not afraid of the Duke of Loyalty. On the contrary, he dared to go against him. By doing this, he could make that person satisfied and think highly of him. He could also gain the reputation of not fearing power and protect his grandson's safety. By killing 3 birds with 1 stone, Yu Shiyue's determination was clearly felt by every official of the Ministry of Justice. Lu San had changed his testimony. Everything had gone smoothly. From the beginning of the matter until now, the Duke of Loyalty had not intervened or done anything. This instinctively gave Yu Shiyue a thought. The Duke of Loyalty was afraid. He was not as powerful as people said he was. At this moment, a large net was falling over Yu Shiyue's head. It was a pity that he did not know about it and was still feeling complacent about the results in front of him. In an outer courtyard not far from the palace, Su Yozhen was standing respectfully in a room as warm as spring. He seemed to be looking straight ahead, but from the corner of his eyes he would inadvertently fall on the chief eunuch, Jining, who was sitting opposite him with a serious expression. Speaking of the relationship between Su Yozhen and Yang Qindong, not many people knew about it. On the contrary, based on some of their past, everyone thought that they should be enemies. Just like the initial impeachment, that was the use of swords and spears. Even the recommendation later was interpreted by others as him trying to use flattery to deal with Yang Qindong. It was only because his luck was too good that it was resolved. It was because of these past events that Su Yozhen was able to walk the path of Jining and not be suspected by others. Not only that, but because he knew the way of an official and often gave gifts to Jining, he had become one of his trusted aides. With this relationship, it was not difficult for Su Yozhen to see Jining. What's more, when he came this time he even brought some extremely confidential documents with him. From the moment he gave it to Jining, her expression had been very solemn. Almost an hour had passed, but Jining's furrowed brows showed no signs of relaxing. After about half a cup of tea's time, Jining let out a long sigh and put down the manuscript. She looked up at Su Yozhen, who was standing there respectfully, and asked, "Where did these things come from?" "A merchant paid a high price for it. You also know that in this world, as long as there is money, there are few things that cannot be done." Su Yozhen's face was full of respect, and she spoke very carefully. "Merchant?" Jining didn't understand at first, but then she nodded. "That's right. The Duke of Loyalty isn't completely loyal. As long as you give him enough money, it's possible to get some of his secrets. But what does he want to do with these things?" Jining held the documents that recorded all the mistakes that Yu Shiyue had made since he became an official. She knew very well that if these were made public, this Minister of Justice's career would be over. How could a person with so many problems be in charge of a country's criminal justice? Wouldn't this be like saying that a thief needs to be interrogated? Wouldn't he be laughed at by others? It must be because of Yu Xiong. After all, as the mastermind behind the scenes, he almost hurt the 3rd Madam of the Duke of Loyalty. With his personality, it would be strange if he didn't retaliate. Su Yozhen spoke as if she was guessing, but in reality, this guess was already a kind of reality. But even if Yu Xiong did something wrong, he shouldn't implicate the innocent. After all, Minister Yu is someone that the emperor just used. If something happens to him, it will affect the emperor's reputation. Jining said somewhat angrily. Before she could finish her sentence, Su Yozhen interrupted, "That's true. But eunuch Jin also knows that Yu Xiong is currently in the Ministry of Justice's prison. I've heard that he's doing quite well. So why is he being treated like this? Presumably, if the root of the problem is not solved, this matter will not be solved. In other words, Minister Yu is someone that cannot be avoided. You can't avoid him and you can't act rashly," Jining said in an unquestionable tone. As the emperor's trusted aide and the head eunuch, Jining could not have everything she had now without the emperor's support. Thus, he would not allow anything that would damage the emperor's authority to happen. It was no wonder that he was so angry. Su Yozhen understood this very well. Fortunately, he had already discussed the countermeasures with Yang Qindong. Seeing that Jining was angry and that everything was going according to plan, Su Yozhen took half a step forward. Eunuch Jin, you know the Duke of Loyalty's personality. He is someone who will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. I'm afraid that he is only thinking about how to overthrow Minister Yu and then punish Yu Xiong. As for the consequences, I'm afraid that he won't think too much about it. How could Jining not know such a big truth? However, he still said the same thing. He would not allow anyone to challenge the emperor's authority. Thus, if such a thing was going to happen, he had to stop it. Speak. Presumably, since you were able to come here and spend such a high price to obtain such a thing, you must have your own way. Tell me. Jining was very angry, but there was nothing he could do. After all, Yang Qindong's existence in the imperial court was above all else. He was also the only one who might not care about the emperor's orders. Although this matter had not been confirmed, Jining did not want to try. Because once something was done, there was no possibility of going back on it. Since he did not have the ability to deal with Yang Qindong, he could only start from other places. Thus he placed his hopes on Su Yozhen. As expected, Jining had asked him for a plan. Su Yozhen knew that the other party was going to compromise. This was also the most important part of his discussion with Yang Qindong. They were betting that Jining valued the protection of the emperor's authority. As long as the other party had this intention, the following matters would be easy to handle. On the other hand, if Jining was indecisive about protecting the emperor's authority and protecting Yu Shiyue, then it would be difficult to handle. Did he really have to announce the evidence that Yang Qindong had gathered to the public? If that was the case, he could overthrow the other party, but the effect would not be very good. In order to protect themselves, everyone would inevitably think that Yang Qindong's actions were too extreme. It was even possible that they would band together to oppose him. It was also possible that they would reject him. This would go against Yang Qindong's goal of uniting the majority of the people to peacefully develop the great Ming dynasty's political power. Thus, Yu Shiyue's matter could only be secretly resolved internally. It was not appropriate to bring it out for a public confrontation. Otherwise, it would only result in a lose-lose situation. Since Jining had asked, Su Yozhen also told him the solution according to the plan. Eunuch Jin, in fact, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage has gathered this evidence because he wants to punish the mastermind Yu Xiong. As long as we can satisfy him, it is possible to turn this matter into a small one. Not only can we protect Minister Yu's position, but we can also bring glory to everyone. Hearing that Su Yozhen had a solution, Jin Ying's expression relaxed. Lord Su, this eunuch is willing to listen to your wise opinion. It's like this. Su Yozhen then revealed the entire plan. If we don't want to announce these things to the public, Minister Yu will have to make concessions. As for Yu Xiong, he will have to be sacrificed. Otherwise, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage will not give up. This matter requires Eunuch Jin to personally discuss. As long as you appear, even if Minister Yu is extremely unwilling, he will have to give in. In order to protect Minister Yu's authority, we can even find a scapegoat, such as the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice. We can push all the blame to him. We can say that he made the decision to protect Yu Xiong without Minister Yu's permission. In this way, there will be no need to worry about self-preservation. Wouldn't it be better to have a reputation for being fair and honest? As for the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, I will go to the Hu mansion to look for Lord Hu. As his father-in-law, the Duke of Loyalty and Courage will definitely give me face. Think about it. Third Madam was the one who almost got hurt. Now that the father of the legal wife has appeared, if he still doesn't give up, he will have offended the legal wife because of Third Madam. I think the wise Duke of Loyalty and Courage will know how to choose. Jining nodded repeatedly. Su Yozhen's suggestion was indeed feasible. It could protect the emperor's authority and protect Yu Shiyue's high position. It could be considered an explanation to both sides. However, he was still somewhat suspicious of Hu Jiangning's appearance. Lord Su, are you sure that procurator who will speak up for us? There's nothing impossible in this world. For example, the current brocade guard is still lacking an official. If we can promote him by one rank, this won't be a problem. Su Yozhen chuckled sinisterly, as if everything was as clear as day. Oh ha, not bad, not bad. Jining laughed loudly when he heard this. From the looks of it, it was only a third-rank official position that could settle this matter and protect the emperor's authority. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. Good. Then we'll do as Lord Su says. If this matter succeeds, then Lord Su will have done a great service. In the future, if there's a chance, this eunuch will put in a good word for you in front of the emperor. Many thanks, Eunuch Jin. Su Yozhen pretended to be very happy as he spoke. Then, with a wave of his hand, 5 banknotes from the Yang family's bank, each worth 100,000 taels, were delivered to Jining. Many thanks for eunuch Jin's promotion. This is a small token of my appreciation. A full 500,000 taels. This was no longer a simple token of appreciation. Jin Ying's expression froze at first. Then, as if he had thought of something, he laughed loudly and said, "Good, good. Lord Su is truly an outstanding person. How about this? This eunuch has an idea of what to do. It just so happens that the Ministry of Justice is lacking a left assistant minister. However, whether or not you can be promoted will depend on your luck and the Emperor's mood." Chapter 260. Yes. I'll have to trouble eunuch Jin to help me with everything. Yozhen will remember this. Su Yozhen appeared to be overwhelmed by the favor, but her heart was already blooming with joy. He knew that if Jin Ying could directly request for a position, it meant that the matter was at least 70% complete. Acting as a middleman and paying 500,000 taels of silver to obtain the position of left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice was originally planned by Yang Qindong. It was also a part of his plan. He even had to do this. Even if he couldn't obtain the position, he still had to state his request. Otherwise, why would a person meddle in other people's business? If there were no benefits at all, his original intentions would be suspected by others. On the contrary, if he had a request, his motive would be much simpler. At the very least, no one would suspect that there was something fishy between Su Yozhen and Yang Qindong. In short, it was just one sentence to express his request. It would be best if he succeeded, but if he didn't, he would be cleared of suspicion. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Now, it seemed that things were developing in the best direction. After the discussion, the two of them quickly began to carry out their plan. First, Jin Ying appeared in the prison of the Ministry of Justice. Then Su Yozhen paid a visit to the Hu residence. After the attack on the third Madam of the Duke of Loyalty and Courage, their actions were quickly noticed by people with ulterior motives. After all, regardless of whether it was the Yu family or the Hu family, they were in fact closely related to what happened. At this moment, anyone who came into contact with them could make other explanations and speculations. However, these were merely guesses. As for what exactly happened, no one knew. They only knew that when Jin Ying left the Ministry of Justice Yamen, Yu Shiyue didn't personally send her off. On the contrary, when Su Yozhen left the Hu residence, Hu Zhangning escorted her all the way out. After Hu Zhangning sent Su Yozhen out, he returned to his own study. His father, Hu Xiao, was already seated and waiting. "Father." Upon seeing Hu Xiao, Hu Zhangning immediately revealed an extremely respectful expression. It was a respect that came from the bottom of his heart. "Take a seat." Seeing that his eldest son had returned to the study, Hu Xiao nodded lightly. It wasn't until his son sat down on the chair opposite him that he said in a teaching tone, "Come and analyze this matter. What exactly is going on?" "Wonderful." Hu Zhangning expressed his appreciation for Yang Qindong with words of praise. "What kind of magic?" Hu Xiao's expression did not change, but in his heart, he admired his eldest son's political awareness. Just from this sentence, he could tell that his son seemed to have seen the essence of the matter. "Father." Qindong took advantage of the situation and used a roundabout method to punish the audacious Yu Xiong and attack Yu Shiyue's authority at the same time. More importantly, he planted an important spy in the Ministry of Justice. This is killing 3 birds with 1 stone. Once he's done, he still has to owe him a favor. Isn't that great? Hu Zhangning said in an excited tone. In fact, there was also the matter of his promotion. That was killing 4 birds with 1 stone. However, Hu Changning was not fond of publicity, so he purposely left out one thing. Not many people knew that Su Yozhen was Yang Qindong's subordinate, but Hu Xiao and Hu Zhangning knew. They even knew that this person's impeachment and subsequent recommendation had been ordered by Yang Qindong. That was why this person had been promoted like a rocket. However, although he was the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel and seemed to hold a high position, his usefulness was very limited. This was because both the Minister of Personnel, Wang Zhi, and the left assistant minister, He Wenyuan, had a good impression of Yang Qindong. In this department there was no point in assigning more people. It was inevitable that someone would jump out. This time, he had made use of the opportunity to insert himself into the situation. The promotion of the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Personnel to the left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice meant that Yang Qindong had an important spy in the Ministry of Justice. With time, it would not be difficult for him to nurture a trusted subordinate. Very good. Ning has grown up. Your father is very gratified to see this. However, I don't know if you've thought about what he's trying to do. If he's just trying to protect himself, he could just be like Duke Ying and keep a low profile. However, his current actions have clearly exceeded the scope of an official. What is he trying to do? Hu Xiao agreed with Hu Xiangning's analysis. However, after living for so long and seeing so many things, he was still able to see the essence of the matter. What was Yang Qindong trying to do? What was he trying to do? Hu Xiangning was also stunned by this question. That's right. If he was only after glory, splendor, wealth, and status, he should already have everything. Why was he still scheming? Could it be that he was only retaliating because Yu Xiong had provoked him this time? If that was the case, then he could have publicized the evidence he had given Su Yozhen to the world. That way he would be able to vent his anger and take revenge. However, he had not done so. Instead, he had used this opportunity to allow Hu Xiangning and Su Yozhen to advance. This action was rather thought-provoking. Let's not talk about what Hu Xiao and Hu Xiangning had said behind closed doors. On the morning of the second day after Jin Ying and Su Yozhen made their move, a person had come to the entrance of the Ministry of Justice to complain. He had repeatedly accused Yu Xiong, saying that Yu Xiong had stolen his wife and forced him to leave his hometown. At the same time, he had also provided a confession. The details on the confession were very detailed. There were all the necessary witnesses and material evidence. It was an ironclad case. There were many citizens of the capital accompanying the person who had filed the complaint. There were many onlookers. In an instant, the matter had become a hot topic. Even if the Ministry of Justice wanted to suppress it, they could not do so. With this new case, the treatment of Yu Xiong, who had still been abusing his power in prison, immediately changed. He was moved from a single cell to an ordinary cell. Not only were there many prisoners there, but the smell was also very unpleasant. Faced with such an environment, Yu Xiong was naturally puzzled. He shouted out his identity. "My grandfather is the Minister of Justice. How dare you treat me like this?" It would have been better if he had not said this. As soon as he said this, the prisoners in his cell looked at him with even more ferocious gazes. Some of these people had been wronged and had not been able to find an outlet to vent their anger. Yu Xiong's shout was equivalent to giving them a chance to vent. How could they let go of this opportunity? They would first give him a good beating. In just 3 days, the dust had settled on Yu Xiong's case. Even Yang Qindong had not expected that Yu Xiong would confess many things that no one knew about when he was being tortured by the Ministry of Justice. Among them, there were 3 women who had died at his hands. Because he had done it secretly and had thrown their bodies into the river after the incident, they had sunk to the bottom of the river so that no one knew about it. Now, the spineless Yu Xiong saw that no one was shielding him. Unable to bear the punishment, he had confessed everything. Originally, he had thought that the punishment would not be heavy enough to sentence Yu Xiong to death. He had even needed Lung Feng to secretly take action. But now, with these 3 lives, the newly appointed left assistant minister of the Ministry of Justice, Su Yozhen, immediately sentenced them to death. Once this matter was out, the people of the capital all clapped and cheered. While they rejoiced at the end of the evil tyrant's life, they also sighed at Minister Yu Shiyue's impartiality and Lord Su Yozhen's righteousness in punishing evil. Yu Xiong was dead. He had died on the execution ground. However, Yang Qindong had already thrown this matter to the back of his mind. In his eyes, Yu Xiong was just an ant. Killing him was not enough to make him feel any pride. However, with this person's death, it was likely that other people who wanted to harm him would have to think twice before acting. They would have to think about how tough their necks were and whether they would be able to escape death after making a move. Yu Xiong's matter was just a small interlude. He was the kind of person who sought his own death. Yang Qindong's current focus was on the Yang Family Academy and the construction of the Great Ming's new army. After receiving the 2 million taels of silver, Shiheng and Jin Ying each embezzled 300,000 taels of silver. After adding in the demands of the various officials, they only had 1 million taels of silver. However, this 1 million taels of silver was enough for them to build a standing army of 150,000 people, 3 firearm battalions of 15,000 people, and an artillery battalion of 2,000 people. 1 million taels of silver was enough to accomplish these things. It was all thanks to the Ming dynasty's military household system. As the saying went, once a person entered a military household, they would be a military household for generations to come. In other words, once a person was recognized as a soldier, their sons could only be soldiers and their daughters could only marry soldiers. It was also this measure that ensured that the number of soldiers in the Great Ming dynasty's army was always maintained at a very high level. There were articles that recorded that during the Great Ming dynasty, the standing army in the country was always more than 1.5 million people. Among them, the military household system played an important role. Looking at the information sent to him by the Security Bureau, Yang Qindong knew that the road ahead was full of thorns. Disregarding everything else, just the large number of soldiers was not easy to deal with. They were all Han people and they were all from the same ancestor. Could he bear to kill all of them? Not to mention he did not have the ability to do so right now. Yang Qindong wanted the Great Ming Dynasty to become the center of the world and the Great Ming Dynasty's civilization to become the ancestor of human civilization. In the future, no matter where a Han person went, they would be respected and looked up to by others. This would require the support of countless people, and they would definitely not allow a major event like internal strife to happen. However, there were some things that did not depend on one's own will. When someone hated you and wanted to kill you, it was not something that could be resolved just by giving them some benefits. After pondering for a moment, Yang Qindong gave a secret order to his most trusted subordinate, Tiger's man. Let's do this. Find a merchant to find Yang Guang. No matter what, the position of general of the artillery battalion must be taken by him. Don't be stingy with money. This is very important for our safety. If a person wanted to accomplish great things, help others and bring everyone to power, they had to meet one condition, and that was absolute safety. Looking at the new army of the Great Ming Dynasty, regardless of whether it was ordinary soldiers or elite firearms battalion, Yang Qindong did not care about them at all. With the large warehouse that could be entered at any time if they provoked him, he could casually take out some new weapons and deal with them without a problem. However, the artillery battalion was annoying. Chapter 261. After all, Yang Qindong was a mortal, and the Yang Manor was not an impenetrable fortress. If the artillery battalion really set their sights on him, the consequences would be unimaginable. This was the most annoying thing. Yang Qindong had come into contact with Yang Guang a few times and found that he was a man of few words. However, he was a loyal and considerate person who valued loyalty greatly. If Yang Qindong could spend some money to befriend him, he could at least warn him in advance, even though he couldn't make him disobey the orders of his superior or even the acting emperor at a critical moment. This way he would have more time to react, and an additional layer of protection for his life. Tiger's mane nodded after receiving the order. Young master, don't worry. I'll go to the Security Bureau and find a clever person to disguise himself as a wealthy businessman to support Deputy Commander Yang. But young master, our men have discovered that Guard Captain Ike Shang is wantonly moving through the capital. I've heard that he spent a large sum of money, and our men have learned that he's already heading for the sea. It seems like he's planning to return to Japan and get reinforcements. Young master, do you want us to intercept and kill him on the way or inform Commander Gao Xiong and have him take care of the problem at sea? No need. Let him do as he pleases. Also, inform Gao Xiong and tell him not to make things difficult for the messenger. If it's necessary, you can say some words of support, but don't take any practical actions. Speaking of this issue, Yang Qindong's face regained its indifferent smile. Because of Junko, Ikigami Yuki failed in his pursuit, and the head of the diplomatic mission, Aoki Yuki, was held accountable and imprisoned in the Ministry of Rights. Although there was no imperial order to condemn him, everyone could see that he was simply being held in a different place. Naturally, it was Yang Qindong's intervention that led to the current situation. During the new year, when he went to see his father-in-law and grandfather, he openly said that he would definitely teach Aoki Yugue a lesson and let him know that the Great Ming Dynasty was not Japan. He would not be able to do whatever he wanted. It was Yang Qindong who had expressed his stance, and Aoki Utakai had been detained by the law enforcement officials of the Ministry of Rights. And because Yang Qindong had spent a lot of money, neither the Ministry of Justice nor the embroidered uniform guards had interfered. As a result, even though Qi Shang, the captain of the guards, had done a lot, the situation had not been alleviated or resolved. Since the matter couldn't be solved, Qi Shang made a foolish decision. He reported the matter to his country and asked his country to step forward and pressure the Great Ming Dynasty. Perhaps it was because he had been in Japan for a long time, coupled with the fact that he was a samurai, it was difficult for him to look down on other countries. In short, he had made up his mind. And this was exactly what Yang Qindong wanted to see. This was the result he wanted. Japan was one of the countries that the Great Ming Dynasty had decided not to conquer. If they wanted to deal with them, they would need an excuse. Princess Junko was a fuse. If he kept this person by his side, the rulers of Japan would definitely not tolerate it. They would be worried that the Great Ming Empire supported the Japanese royal family. In order to solve this problem, Junko had to die. If he wanted to kill this person, he had to go to the capital of the Great Ming Empire to stir up trouble. At that time, Yang Qindong would make the situation worse. Once the matter reached a certain extent, under the pressure, it would be impossible for Dai Zong not to want to conquer Japan. In this way he would have a righteous reason. In the end, this was Yang Qindong's plan. But at the same time it was also a helpless move. Japan was an island country, and its coastline was so long that even Yang Shi's navy couldn't do anything about it. They couldn't completely block it, so they might as well not block it. Let them take the initiative to cause trouble and then fight back openly. Tiger's Mane didn't quite understand Yang Qindong's words. But out of absolute trust in the young master, he nodded happily. Okay, young master, I will give the order to Commander Gao Xiong in your name. Soon after the new year, the snow and ice in the capital began to melt. After the spring breeze, everything began to recover, and the land began to see green again. The weather became warmer and warmer, and the people in the capital began to take off their winter clothes. They changed out of their bulky cotton robes and walked on the streets. The endless stream of people indicated the prosperity of the great Ming Empire. As the mercenaries and the Walla established trade at the border, all kinds of novel things appeared, which opened the eyes of the people of the Walla. While they enjoyed life, they put down their sharp weapons, and it was a scene of harmony. When the border was stabilized, the situation in the capital would naturally be stable. The merchants were busy making money, and the farmers were busy with the New Year's spring plowing. Especially with the appearance of the hydraulic wells, they saw the hope of a bumper harvest. The officials were also busy with their own government affairs. Those who wanted to be promoted were thinking of ways to get promoted. Those who wanted to make money were thinking of ways to make money. Even the emperor of the great Ming dynasty, Zhu Qiu, was busy training the army and managing the country's affairs. Some officials who had similar ideas to him were promoted. Some stubborn officials were either left idle or demoted. The power was slowly gathering in his hands. Yang Qindong observed all these changes as if he was an outsider. Other than reading the intelligence sent by the Security Bureau every day, he spent most of his time teaching the students of the Yang Family Academy. After nearly 2 months, more than 60 people were eliminated from the original 101 people, and only 2/5 of them were left. Among the people who left, some of them couldn't keep up. Originally, they wanted to use the name of the Duke of Loyalty and the East Marshal to fish in troubled waters and make a name for themselves. Then, with the title of this person's student, it could be imagined that it would be much easier to mingle in the officialdom. There were also some people who really had the idea of learning. After all, the person who could make such a majestic poem like Snow of the Yang Family Village must have great strength. But when they really learned it, they knew that he taught more about numbers, physics, chemistry, and science. And in the big environment where only Confucianism was respected, these were nothing more than heterodox methods, and it was difficult to be recognized by the orthodox. Since they couldn't be recognized, they simply stopped learning. The third part of the people who left were those who didn't have enough IQ or couldn't bear the hardships. This was because the Yang Family Academy required students to run every day and stand in military posture. Under this semi-militarized management, some of the young people who only knew how to study were unable to bear it. In the end, because they made too many mistakes, their military posture was taken away and they had to leave. Most of them left, and 2/5 of them were the elites among them. Among them, Yang Qindong did find a lot of good seedlings. While he carefully observed, he also guided them according to their individual advantages, making the learning atmosphere of the people who stayed very high. It was worth mentioning that Junko actually relied on her own ability to persist until now. Originally, Yang Qindong accepted Junko as a student because he wanted to put her in his sight. After all, he still needed her in the future, so he casually accepted her. When he made this decision, he was also prepared to let her go and force her to stay if she couldn't hold on at any time. But unexpectedly, although Junko was young, her body was full of tenacity, and she was one of the best in all kinds of assessments and studies. Not only did she not rely on Yang Qindong to stay, but she also became a goddess in the eyes of many men. More than half of the male students secretly liked her, including Wang Si, the grandson of the Minister of the Ministry of Personnel, Wang Ji. Junko's fluent Mandarin, coupled with her beautiful face and lively personality, made Wang Si unable to extricate himself. Junko clearly knew all of this, but she didn't point it out. She didn't agree or disagree, but instead kept a distance from the people who liked her. Today she took the initiative to say a few words to you, but tomorrow or the day after she might ignore you for a few days. This kind of performance had once caused many male students to be unable to study normally. Humph! This is their innate charm. After hearing Tiger's Mane's report and thinking of the things they produced in the future, and the Aoi people who were often mentioned by Chinese men, this Junko was obviously their ancestor. It wasn't a crime for a person to be beautiful, but if they wanted to use this power to stir up trouble in his territory, Yang Qindong couldn't tolerate them. Tiger's Mane spread the news that Junko is a girl from Japan. No matter who marries her in the future, he will have to follow her to Japan and become her son-in-law. Even the children born in the future will have to follow her family name. Yang Qindong winked at Tiger's Mane, revealing a deep meaning in his eyes. Tiger's Mane immediately understood and immediately said, "Young master, don't worry, I will do it right away." Tiger's Mane complied, and only an hour later, Junko appeared outside Yang Qindong's study with a beautiful face. With a wronged expression on her face, Junko didn't dare to take a step forward. These days she more or less understood this Dong Shui in people's eyes. This person seemed to be very kind, but he had a sense of propriety and bottom line when doing things. For example, this study was not a place she could enter and leave at will. She remembered that once she inadvertently wanted to take advantage of Yang Qindong's absence to take a look, but when she came to the door, a sharp knife was placed on her throat. Junko didn't even know when the other person appeared, but she felt a boundless killing intent. Under this kind of killing intent, she was afraid. Junko had a feeling that if she really dared to take a step forward, she was afraid that her head would be separated from her body, and she would die. After that incident, Junko became a lot more well-behaved. She also had a clearer understanding that Dong Shui, who always had a smile on his face, was not only the idol of many women, but also a demon who killed without batting an eyelid. Chapter 262. Logically speaking, after knowing that he was a devil, the most important thing to do was to leave. Captain Kobayashi had told her more than once that he didn't find anyone watching her, but for some reason Junko didn't want to leave. Whenever she was about to make the decision to leave, Yang Qindong's smiling face would often appear in her mind, and that smile would make her linger back and forth. So she always found various reasons to persuade Kobayashi and herself to stay in the Yang family manor and the Yang family academy day after day. Staying in the Yang family academy was the happiest time of Junko's life. Here she not only enjoyed equal treatment with everyone, but also didn't have to pay attention to any rules when interacting with people. On the contrary, she could also learn some new knowledge that she had never heard of before or even thought of before. Slowly, Junko became deeply immersed in it, and she also found that the students who were able to stay in the academy were very smart and could endure hardships. These advantages were exactly what her father, who was in the royal family of Japan, wanted. So she gave birth to other thoughts, which was to take these people for her own use. If there was a chance after these people finished their studies, she could deceive them to go to Japan. She believed that it would play a positive role in her father's efforts to stabilize the throne. In order to achieve this unspeakable goal, Junko deliberately used her charm jutsu, intentionally or unintentionally making contact with the male students. She had been formally trained since childhood on how to please a man. Soon, Junko achieved her goal, making more than one student fall head over heels for her and express their willingness to submit to her. She thought that if she continued to do this when she graduated from the academy, she could leave with these people. But an unexpected disaster happened, and her identity as a Japanese was suddenly exposed. Not only that, but it was also said that the man she was going to marry was likely to eventually go to Japan by marrying into her family. As soon as this matter came out, the expressions of those male students who admired her instantly changed. At that time, the difference between the status of men and women was very obvious. It was very common for men to be the head of the family and women to be the head of the family. Things like marrying into the family was absolutely disgraceful. As for the students who were able to stay until now, which one of them wasn't smart and proud? How could they do such a disgraceful thing? At that moment, the male students who liked to listen to Junko's words quickly began to keep their distance from her. Some of them even avoided her as if she was a scourge. This made Junko's efforts go down the drain. She was so angry that she wanted to look for Yang Qindong to be the judge. She had a feeling that the person who could do such a thing must be Dong Shui. Outside the study, Junko stood there with a stubborn and wronged look on her face. No one knew if she was really good at acting or if she was really showing her true feelings. In short, her tears flowed down from the corners of her eyes, indicating that she was one of the victims. A young girl, a beautiful young girl, a young girl with a face that could topple cities. At this moment, her appearance was like a pear blossom in the rain. It was likely that any man who saw her would feel pity for her and would not be able to help but go forward to comfort her. But at the door of the study for a long time no one appeared. It was as if this place was really empty. But only Junko knew in her heart that there must be more than one pair of eyes staring at her in the dark. This feeling was very strong, but it also made her heart full of helplessness. When a person's proudest side couldn't occupy the slightest advantage, it must be the time of despair. Her tears flowed freely. It gave people the feeling that the sentence "women are made of water" was really true. Junko stood there for half an hour, but her tears didn't dry up. Finally, Yang Qindong's unique magnetic voice sounded in the study. "Come in." Finally getting permission, Junko felt relieved. Her anger was not in vain. While she breathed a deep sigh of relief, she secretly brewed enough tears. Then she stepped on the 3-inch golden lotus and slowly walked into the study. She made sufficient preparations and even thought about how she should behave when she met Yang Qindong. For example, what she should do when Yang Qindong looked at her, or how she should display her advantage when he looked at her with a pained expression on his face. She should make the best use of it. And what she should do when he didn't look at her. Junko, who was fully prepared, was even confident that after seeing Yang Qindong, he would take pity on her, and then what she should ask for as the dominant position and so on. However, all her preparations were ruined by Yang Qindong's seemingly casual words after entering the study. "Do you know Kimura Yoshida? Do you know him?" Kimura-kun. As soon as she heard this name, Junko's body trembled, and then she threw all her previous preparations to the back of her mind. She knew this name too well. Kimura Yoshida, the backbone of the Kimura family, and one of the lackeys who supported General Ashikaga Yoshimasa the most. This person was not only cruel and merciless, but he was also a war maniac. In his eyes, the world should belong to Japan and not a place made up of islands. When she was in the palace, she had heard her father say more than once that some of the backbone of the imperial family had died at the hands of Kimura Yoshida. This was a person who caused her father to have a headache and hatred. How could she not know? So when she heard this name, she couldn't help but tremble and lose her composure. After being stunned for 7 or 8 breaths, she suddenly noticed that Yang Qindong didn't raise his head. Instead, he was looking down at something. Fortunately, no one saw her lose her composure. While rejoicing in her heart, Junko said with a very innocent look, "Of course I've heard of him. In Japan, the Kimura family's power and influence are also very big. By the way, why did the East Marshal mention his name?" Even though he had been lowering his head all this while, he had already sensed that there was something different about Junko. Since she still wanted to continue pretending, he might as well give her a strong dose of medicine. "Oh, it's nothing, it's just that this person came to the Great Ming Dynasty and made a strict protest on behalf of Japan to the Great Ming Dynasty. He asked us to release Aoki Yuki, and also asked us to apologize and compensate them. By the way, he also said that if he was not satisfied, Japan will regard this as a provocation to them. At that time, it is very likely that Japan's army will appear in the Great Ming Dynasty's territory, and we will be responsible for it." As if he was talking about a fact, Yang Qindong's words didn't have the slightest emotion. But these words in Junko's ears made her feel shocked. What does this Kimura Yoshida want to do? Does he want to provoke a war between the two countries? Doesn't he know that compared to the current Great Ming Dynasty, Japan's strength is too far? Doing this is simply throwing an egg at a rock, and more importantly, it will put herself in danger. Imagine if Japan really dares to go to war with the Great Ming Dynasty, as the princess of the Japanese imperial family, it is obvious what the result will be. She was shocked by Kimura Yoshida's viciousness. Since the other party came, it is impossible for him not to know that she is in the Great Ming Dynasty, but he still did this. It is clear that he doesn't want to let her live well and even wants to kill her. While Junko was still imagining various possibilities in her heart, Yang Qindong continued to say, "Hey, you are also a Japanese, you should know the gap between you and the Great Ming Dynasty. Kimura Yoshida's approach is simply courting death. If it weren't for the fact that the Great Ming Dynasty is forbidden by the sea, I really want to take the army to visit." "No. Don't, we Japanese are still very peace-loving." As soon as she heard Yang Qindong say that he will bring the army to Japan, and thinking of the various legends of this person defeating the Walla, Junko didn't know why, but she felt a sense of fear. When he heard Junko say that the Japanese are peace-loving, Yang Qindong had a feeling of wanting to laugh in his heart. Looking at the history, once the Japanese became strong, which time didn't they take the initiative to start a war? But now, the princess of the imperial family actually said that they are peace-loving. What a ridiculous statement. But at the same time, it also proved that the current Japan is not strong enough, at least compared to the Great Ming Dynasty, it is still a lot worse. While laughing in his heart, Yang Qindong was calm on the surface. "Oh, Miss Junko is a peace-loving person, this is very good. It is a pity that you are only born in a merchant family, you can't represent Japan." After pointing out that Junko's identity is too ordinary, her words naturally can't be trusted. Junko's face changed greatly. At this time she suddenly wanted to confess her identity, but this thought just flashed through her mind, because she knew that if Japan really did something bad to the great Ming dynasty, once her identity was exposed, it would be extremely dangerous, and she might even be immediately arrested by the great Ming dynasty's army. Her identity can't be exposed. For Yang Qindong's words, Junko can't refute. She can only stand there and ask with a cautious attitude, "I don't know what your emperor and ministers think about Kimura Yoshida's proposal?" Normally, it was a bit inappropriate for Junko to ask such a question. Yang Qindong didn't have to say it to her, but this was originally part of the plan, so Dong Shuai showed that he didn't object and said, "On this issue the emperor and the minister's views are not unified. Some people are really frightened by Kimura Yoshida's words. You also know that the great Ming dynasty's territory is vast, and the coastline near the sea is extremely long, so it is impossible to be vigilant everywhere. If Japan really attacks in places where we are not prepared, it will be a real headache, so some ministers propose to release the former head of the envoy Aoki Yuki and hand you over." Chapter 263. You're going to hand me over? Junko was surprised. That's right. Back then those assassins came for you. I just happened to pass by. If we want to compromise, of course we will hand you over to the Japanese. I was wondering how you offended them. It looks like they won't give up until they catch you. Yang Qindong asked curiously. He didn't mention that Junko was the princess of Japan. He wanted to see how long she could hide it. When she heard Yang Qindong say that the great Ming was not only prepared to compromise, but also wanted to hand her over, Junko's face turned pale. No, they hate my family. Once they catch me they will kill me. As she spoke, Junko had already walked to Yang Qindong's side. She reached out and grabbed his arm. Her eyes were filled with a pitiful look. "Don't, I will faint if you continue like this." The two of them were very close to each other. Yang Qindong could already smell the fragrance of Junko's body. He enjoyed the feeling very much, but he still said, "You don't have to be too anxious. What I'm saying is just the opinion of some of the ministers. Some of them think that we shouldn't compromise with Japan. If they want to cause trouble for us, we'll open up the Forbidden Sea and send an army to Japan. We'll teach them a lesson and let them know who they can't afford to provoke." When Yang Qindong said her father's name, Junko's face changed. "No. The emperor will not make trouble for the great Ming. There must be some villains behind this. You must investigate this thoroughly." "How do you know that the emperor won't make trouble for the great Ming? You are not a member of the imperial family." Yang Qindong asked with a surprised expression. When Junko heard these words, she couldn't help but open her mouth to defend herself. However, just as she opened her mouth, she quickly closed it again. "Yes, it's just my guess. When I was in the country, I heard from my father that the emperor is an emperor who doesn't like war. I don't think he will take the initiative to start a war with the great Ming." "Oh? So it was just hearsay. Unfortunately, it seems that what you heard is not true. Kimura Yoshida has already arrived, and he has already expressed the intentions of your emperor. The way I see it, this war might start soon." Yang Qindong shook his head and expressed his opinion. Junko was very anxious at this moment, and she was cursing Yang Qindong's stupidity in her heart. The outside world said that Dong Shuai was smart, but now it seemed that he was just SOSO. He actually mistakenly thought that the Emperor of Japan wanted to go to war with the great Ming dynasty. What a stupid idea. At this time, Junko really wanted to open Yang Qindong's head and see what he was thinking. Once again, the thought of exposing her identity popped up in Junko's mind. She opened her mouth but didn't say anything in the end. She didn't know what would happen if she revealed her true identity. She didn't dare to take the risk. On the contrary, she believed in herself more. She decided to leave Yang village immediately and find a way to go back to Japan to see her father. Kimura Yoshida's coming to the great Ming dynasty was simply a conspiracy to overthrow the royal family. General Ashikaga Yoshimasa clearly wanted to use war to mobilize the emotions of the entire country. Only in times of war could a general have more power and do many things that he couldn't do in normal times. Junko originally wanted to ask who revealed that she was Japanese, but because of the appearance of Kimura Yoshida, she was no longer in the mood to care about these trivial matters. After leaving Yang Qindong's study somewhat absent-mindedly, she went to Captain Shaolin's room. When he saw the princess take the initiative to appear, Kobayashi was naturally very happy, but when he saw Gong Yan's face as if she had been bullied, he couldn't help but say angrily, "Princess, who bullied you? Tell Kobayashi, I will teach him a lesson." Both of them spoke in Japanese, so they weren't afraid of being eavesdropped. Only at this time could Junko be completely relaxed. "Kobayashi, don't be agitated. No one bullied me. I just got the news that Kimura Yoshida is here." Junko then told Kobayashi the news she got from Yang Qindong in detail. When he heard that Kimura Yoshida was here and threatened the great Ming dynasty, Kobayashi immediately said angrily, "Princess, don't be afraid. I will personally kill this person tonight. As long as he is dead, all the problems will be solved." No. Junko shook her head decisively after hearing that. She didn't believe that Kobayashi could kill Kimura Yoshida with his strength. Since he was here, security was naturally the most important thing. Even if the emperor of the great Ming dynasty didn't have a definite result, he would send a large number of troops to protect him. Kobayashi alone couldn't do it. Junko's mind was still clear, and she had a clear understanding of the situation in front of her. It was precisely because of this that she didn't agree to Kobayashi's request. Instead she said, "Kobayashi, you can't do it. It's too risky. This princess has decided that you will protect me and leave here. Then we will find a boat to leave the great Ming dynasty and return to Japan. I will tell everything to my father. Then he will have a way to solve the current situation," Junko said firmly. She decided to leave Yang village and the great Ming dynasty, not because she was afraid of death, but because she didn't want to see Kimura Yoshida's conspiracy succeed. She needed to tell her father about it. She couldn't let him be kept in the dark. In the study, Tiger's Mane quietly entered and came to Yang Qindong. He whispered, "Young master, Miss Junko went to find Kobayashi and now she has returned to her room. Our people have noticed that Kobayashi has gone to bed. It's daytime now and he's already sleeping. It seems that he wants to take action at night. What do you think?" Yang Qindong smiled. This Junko was a decisive person. It was a pity that she was a girl. If she was a boy, the future of Japan would be in her hands. Yang Qindong guessed that there would be a lot of changes. "Young master, don't worry. She can't run away." Tiger's Mane patted his chest and promised. He had to stay in Yang village every day. Although there were a lot of things to do, he rarely had the opportunity to do it. Now that there was finally someone who wanted to test his sword, how could he not be excited? Jingqing Ministry of Rites Yamen. Kimura Yoshida, who was not tall and had a standard Japanese beard, walked out of the Ministry of Rites Yamen accompanied by Ikegami. As he walked, he grumbled. It could be seen that he was very angry at this moment. "Kimura-kun, please calm down. The Ministry of Rites' attitude has always been bad. All of this is related to the Duke of Loyalty." Ikegami saw the murderous look on Kimura's face. He was afraid that he would be implicated, so he quickly targeted Yang Qindong. "Waka. Who the hell is that Duke of Loyalty? How dare he be the enemy of Japan? Does he want to die? And Ikegami, you really disappoint me. The country spent so much effort to cultivate you. Why can't you deal with a Han?" Kimura Yoshida was indeed full of anger, and this time he vented all his anger on Qishang. Ikegami quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. The concept of hierarchy in Japan was very strict. As a subordinate, he must unconditionally obey the orders of the superior. Even if he knew that it was wrong, he had to carry it out. Obviously, the great Ming dynasty system was far inferior to Japan's. Seeing that Ikegami's attitude was good, Kimura Yoshida's face was not as serious as before. "Let me ask you, is the princess still in Yang village?" "Yes, we have been watching outside, but we didn't see her come out." Ikegami nodded his head vigorously again and replied. "Very good, tonight we will catch the princess and massacre the Yang village." Kimura Yoshida's face showed a ruthless expression. When he thought of the beautiful and young face of the princess, his whole body couldn't help but tremble. It was a precursor of excitement. "Kimura-kun, please reconsider." When Ikegami heard that Kimura Yoshida was going to attack the Yang village for some reason, Ikegami thought of the omnipresent mysterious gun that night. That was the first time he felt fear since he became a samurai. In fact, in his mind, there was nothing that could stop that advanced firearm at the moment. Seeing Ikegami's expression, Kimura Yoshida said with a look of disappointment, "What's wrong? Are you afraid?" "Ikegami, what you have done is a disgrace to the samurai of Japan." Ikegami, who was reprimanded, thought of the honor that a samurai should have. With a firm expression he said, "Hey, Ikegami is wrong. Please give me a chance, I will do my best tonight." "No need." Kimura Yoshida waved his hand and said arrogantly, "This time I brought 3 jonin, 10 chunin and 30 genin from Japan. Tonight I will let them do the job. As for you, you should reflect on whether you can still be called a real samurai." Kimura Yoshida was arrogant, and his methods were cruel. It was also true that he regarded human lives as nothing. However, it didn't mean that he was stupid. On the contrary, he had the confidence to say such words. The source of his confidence was the 43 ninjas that the Kimura family sent to him. The number of ninjas in the entire Kimura family was no more than 200. This time they used a quarter of their strength to prove Kimura Yoshida's position in the family, and also proved that he was determined to accomplish his mission. Ikigami originally wanted to object and proposed that he take the initiative to lead the team. However, when he heard that there were 43 ninjas and 3 of them were jonin, he was relieved. This force was more than enough to deal with an army of 500 people, let alone a small village. Even if those firearms are powerful, in the face of a ninja who appears and disappears like a ghost, they can only passively be beaten and wait for death. Chapter 264. At the back door of the courtyard where the Japanese diplomatic mission was staying, the waiter who came to deliver their meals as usual was suddenly asked to serve more than a dozen jars of high-concentration wine. This sudden situation was quickly sent to the secret agents of the Security Bureau, who then sent it to Director Yang San. Then it was sent to the most confidential study in the inner courtyard of the Yang Manor. More than a dozen jugs of high-concentration wine. Hearing this sudden news, Yang Qindong fell into deep thought. In his previous life he had fought with a lot of Japanese intelligence personnel, including some high-level ninjas. At that time he naturally saw a lot of information about them, and one of them was that as a real ninja, they needed a lot of high-concentration wine before making a move. First, it was used to boost their courage before killing, and second, it was used to clean the ninja sword. In the eyes of a real ninja, the ninja sword was like a second life and was extremely sacred. Before using the sword, it was necessary to wipe it clean. This was originally a custom and also a kind of respect. If it was just ordinary wine, even if the amount was a little bit more, it wouldn't be a problem because there were many explanations, and it didn't necessarily mean that they wanted to do something. But to ask for so much high-concentration wine, it was almost beyond the limit of human drinking. Under such circumstances, Yang Qindong couldn't help but think about it. In his mind, some of the history of ninjas came to mind. It seems that at this time, ninjas were very popular in Japan, and even many big families would train and cultivate ninjas from childhood. Such ninjas were loyal enough and there was no need to worry about betrayal. So, is it possible that the Kimura family also sent ninjas? It has to be said that Yang Qindong's mind was really smart, and just from this small matter he thought of a lot of possibilities. Tiger's Mane, don't make a move on Junko and Kobayashi, let them go, we just need to follow from a distance, I think it may be very lively tonight. Yes, young master. When Tiger's Mane heard the word lively, the blood in his body spurted out, and he was afraid that if he didn't make a move for a long time, his bones would slowly solidify. Tiger's Mane went to make the arrangements. According to the young master's instructions, they couldn't bring too many people, but they had to be elite. As soon as he left, Yang Qindong turned and walked into the inner room of the study. Usually without his permission, even Hu Yen and Tiger's Mane were not allowed to enter. It could be said that this was his absolute private territory. As soon as Yang Qindong entered, he turned around and disappeared, entering the large warehouse. Don't fight a battle you have no confidence in. It was often easy for big shots to fail in small gutters. In order to prevent such a thing from happening to himself, Yang Qindong would not have any thoughts of underestimating the enemy. Since he suspects that the other side may have ninjas, he has to make some preparations in advance just in case. Compared to the ninjas who have been treated as death warriors since childhood, his life is really different. Junko knew nothing about the measures Kimura Yoshida might take. She only knew that this person appeared in the capital of the great Ming dynasty, and she was no longer safe here. She didn't even tell Yang Qindong that the Kimura family raised ninjas, because she was afraid that the more she said, the more flaws she would leave, and eventually lead to the suspicion of the other side. After all, Yang Qindong was too tall in her heart and too smart, even to the point of almost reaching the point of omnipotence. In the face of such a person, she had to be careful every time she said a word. After a seemingly long wait, it finally came to night. When the sky was completely dark, the people of the Yang village and the academy had dinner and entered the sleep mode. Kobayashi appeared in Junko's room like a ghost. Ah, Kobayashi, you are here. Did anyone notice you? Seeing Kobayashi suddenly appear in her room, Junko was surprised at first, and then asked with concern. Your Highness, don't worry, no one noticed me. I have been here for so long and they no longer pay attention to me. Also, I have found a way to leave the village. There is a loophole when they change the defense. As long as we seize the right time, we can leave without anyone noticing. Kobayashi said confidently. But what he didn't know was that the so-called loophole was left by Yang Qindong early in the morning. He knew that no defense could be 100% safe, so he deliberately left an obvious loophole. Instead of letting the opponent deliberately find the loophole, it was better to directly give him a ready-made one, so that the opponent would not have other ideas. Although Junko was smart, she knew too little about these military matters, so she chose to completely trust Kobayashi. Well, Kobayashi, then let's leave. Yes, Your Highness, please follow me. In a while, in order to increase our speed, Kobayashi may have to do something outside the rules. When saying these words, Kobayashi's face instinctively turned red. The so-called violation of the rules naturally referred to some necessary physical contact between the two of them. In order to leave here, Junko didn't care so much and immediately nodded. Well, I will listen to Kobayashi's arrangement. After the agreement, the two people appeared in the dark like two leopard cats, and then passed through several courtyards. Sometimes Kobayashi reached out and held Junko's slender waist and ran quickly with her. In this way, after about a quarter of an hour, the two people walked out of the outer courtyard of the Jianghu village and came to the outside desolate land. At this time it was spring. Although there was some grass, it was not very tall, and was not enough to cover their bodies, especially at night when the wind blew. It made Junko shiver. Princess, are you okay? When Kobayashi saw Junko's body shiver, he instinctively asked with concern. I'm fine, let's leave here quickly. Junko clenched her teeth and shook her head. She only had one thought in her mind, and that was to inform Father Emperor about Kimura Yoshida's appearance in the great Ming dynasty, and for this purpose, it was just a little cold. What was it? In this way the two shadows, one in front and one behind, went farther and farther away from the Jianghu village, and slowly disappeared in the open wilderness. In order to take care of Junko, Kobayashi's speed was not very fast. The two people, one in front and one behind, used half an hour to walk 10 miles, but even so, Junko's legs were already as heavy as iron lead. This was because she was running with the students in the academy, and if there was no real training, she was afraid that she would not be able to persist until now. Princess, do we need to take a rest? Looking at Junko's painful face, Kobayashi asked nervously. It's okay, I can still persist. Although cold and tired all over her body, the stubborn Junko still refused Kobayashi's kindness. But just as she said this, suddenly a big hand covered her small cherry mouth, and she was caught off guard and was firmly pressed. After feeling that her mouth was tightly blocked, Junko's eyes showed extreme panic. Looking carefully, she found that the person who pressed her mouth was actually Kobayashi, and her eyes showed disbelief. She did not expect that her most trusted guard captain would dare to have any bad thoughts about her. Shoo. His right hand covered Junko's mouth, and his left index finger stretched out, and after making a shushing gesture, Kobayashi's ears perked up to listen for something. It was just that Junko did not see the situation in front of her because she was too beautiful. She knew that this was both a strength and a weakness. The strength was that when she did something she could do twice the result with half the effort, and it was easy to attract the favor of others. The weakness was that her appearance was given by heaven, and it was easy to attract the bad thoughts of others, so she had to be on guard. But she never thought that her most trusted Kobayashi would have such bad thoughts about her. The moment her mouth was covered, she completely lost her judgment, and the only thing left was her constant struggle and resistance. At this time, Kobayashi was concentrating on the very light footsteps he heard just now, and he did not notice Junko's fierce resistance at all. In a moment of carelessness, his right hand was bitten, making him instinctively release his hand, and then Junko's beautiful voice sounded. Kobayashi, what are you doing? Baka, there are people here. Along with Junko's voice, soon a shout in Japanese came from the front, and then dozens of black shadows surrounded them like a fan. Not good, it's an assassin. The pain made Kobayashi shake his right hand, and then the dangerous situation in front of him made him grab Junko's hand and turn around to escape. At this moment, Junko also saw the shadow in the distance with the help of the faint moonlight. She finally knew that Kobayashi didn't have any bad intentions just now, but had discovered something. She immediately regretted it, and her feet naturally turned around and ran quickly under Kobayashi's tug. Kobayashi's six senses were very sharp, and he was able to discover the existence of danger in time, and his reaction was also very fast. But unfortunately, Princess Junko was relying on him, and after running a few steps, the assassin behind him caught up with him. When Kobayashi heard the sound of a sharp blade cutting through the air behind him, he promptly turned around and slashed forward with the katana in his hand. In the dark and silent night, a spark was ignited because of this action. It was a sound that could only be produced when sharp blades collided with each other rapidly. Under the spark, Kobayashi's feet involuntarily took a step back, and the katana was held horizontally in front of him, and his face was incomparably dignified. Although the katana just now repelled a ninja who was chasing after him, it also hindered his retreat speed. In just a short time, at least 4 ninjas surrounded him in front and behind, that is to say, he and Princess Junko have been surrounded at this moment. Junko stood nervously behind Kobayashi, looking around with a panicked expression, and even she could feel the endless murderous intent from the looming black shadows. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.